Hello everyone, I'm the Dream Teller and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I moved into the apartment on a Saturday afternoon. It was a small place in the center of the city, on the third floor of an old building. The paint on the walls looked yellowish in some spots, and the floorboards creaked when I stepped on them. The kitchen was cramped, the bathroom tiles were chipped, and the living room window faced a narrow alley. It was cheap and available, so I took it without thinking too much. I just wanted a place to sleep and work. That first night I noticed something odd about my bedroom ceiling. The plaster looked uneven, and when I stood on a chair, I saw a small hatch that I hadn't noticed during the quick tour. I pushed it, and it opened easily. There was a gap above, and when I shined my flashlight, I saw wooden beams and dusty boards. It seemed like a small attic or crawl space. I didn't go up there right away. I felt tired and wanted to sleep. At around 1 in the morning, I woke up. There was a noise coming from the ceiling. It sounded like wood bending, like someone walking on it. But the sound was constant. A soft, rhythmic creaking. I turned on my bedside lamp. I was alone. I got up, climbed the chair again, and opened the hatch. I shined the flashlight inside. I didn't see anyone. I just saw old wood and darkness. The sound stopped the moment I looked in. I went back to bed, feeling uneasy. I couldn't sleep well. My eyes kept drifting to the ceiling. I waited, listening. I didn't hear anything else that night. The next morning, I tried to ignore what happened. I made coffee, unpacked some boxes, and tried to settle in. The day passed quietly. Around midnight, I decided to check the attic again. I climbed up through the hatch. The space was cramped, and I had to crawl on my hands and knees. The flashlight beam showed dust particles and spider webs. The boards were old and had dark stains. I also noticed a strange smell. It was faint, like damp dirt and something sickly sweet. But I couldn't see anything unusual. No boxes, no old furniture, nothing. Just bare boards and beams. I went back down and tried to sleep. Again, around 1 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of creaking. It was louder this time. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed up immediately. I swept the beam around. Nothing moved. But this time, I saw something that didn't make sense. There were footprints on the dusty boards. They looked wet, as if someone had stepped out of a puddle. They were about the size of an adult's foot, but they didn't show toes or heels clearly. They seemed more like smudged outlines. What really bothered me was how they hovered slightly above the surface. They weren't pressed into the dust. They seemed to float a few centimeters off the wood. When I moved my head, the angle of light changed, and I could still see them. They didn't fade. I followed them, crawling forward. I tried not to make any noise. My breath sounded too loud in my ears. The footprints led to a far corner near a wall. The wall's paint was peeling and flaking onto the boards. The footprints just stopped there. They didn't lead anywhere else. I reached out and touched the wall. It felt cold and damp. I pressed my ear against it. I didn't hear anything. There was no sound of footsteps running away, no scuffling. When I looked back, the footprints were gone. I tried to find them again with the flashlight, but I couldn't. It was just dust and old wood. I climbed down, feeling tense. I locked my bedroom door, even though I was alone in the apartment. I tried to sleep. I dozed off for a few hours, but woke up with a slight headache. The next morning, I noticed a smell in my bedroom. It reminded me of wet soil and decaying flowers. It was subtle, but it was there. I opened the window and tried to air the place out. I checked my shoes, my bags, and the closet to see if something was rotting. I didn't find anything. By late afternoon, the smell got stronger. I wiped the floor, I cleaned the dust, I checked the drains. Nothing helped. That evening, I spotted something odd in the bathroom. On one of the tiles near the bathtub, I saw a faint wet footprint. It was small and smudged, just like the ones in the attic. It hovered just above the tile. I passed my hand over it. I felt no moisture, no texture. It was like a visual stain that floated in midair. When I blinked, it was still there. I tried to rub it with a towel, and it disappeared. I stood there, towel in hand, breathing fast. I didn't know what was going on. I checked the apartment's door, still locked. The windows were shut except the bedroom one, which faced a drop to the alley. There was no way someone got in. I repeated that to myself. Over the next few days, the smell got worse. The footprints started appearing in strange places. One morning, I found them on the inside of my window glass in the living room. They were on the glass, facing inward, as if something stood on the windowsill. I tried taking a picture with my phone. In the photo, I saw nothing. The footprints didn't show up on the screen. The glass looked clean on my phone's display, but when I looked with my own eyes, I could see the wet outlines. I touched the glass and felt nothing. I wiped it down. The footprints vanished when I touched them with a cloth. I stared at my reflection in the window, feeling my chest tighten. Another night, I came home late. I had been out trying to distract myself at a coffee shop. I opened my bedroom door and felt something was off. The smell was strong. My bed looked disturbed, as if someone had lain on it. I turned on the light and saw a single wet footprint right on my pillow. It hovered a few centimeters above the pillowcase, not sinking in. I stood there, heart pounding. I didn't want to sleep in that room anymore. I stripped the sheets and pillows and threw them into the washing machine. I waited there, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching the machine spin. It was late. I was tired and my hands were shaking. I slept on the couch that night. The next day, I decided to call the building manager. I told him about the attic and the noises. I didn't mention the footprints, I just said I heard creaking and smelled something strange. He said the apartment was old and that there was no attic officially, just a crawl space between floors. He said not to worry, it was probably just old wood contracting. He suggested using some deodorizer. He didn't sound concerned. I tried to ignore it. I tried to go about my life. I worked from home, hunched over my laptop in the small living room. During the day, nothing happened. No smells, no footprints, no sounds. But every night around 1 in the morning, I woke up to the creaking. Sometimes I stayed still, listening, heart pounding. Sometimes I got up and checked. When I did, I never found anyone or anything moving, just the occasional footprint in odd places. Once I found them under the kitchen table, arranged in a small circle. Another time I found 2 footprints side by side on the inside of the bathroom mirror. They were always slightly wet, always floating, always disappearing if I tried to touch them. After about a week of this, I started feeling nauseous from the smell. It clung to my clothes and hair. It smelled like damp soil and rotten petals, and it got worse at night. I left the windows open whenever I could, but the smell always returned after midnight. I bought air fresheners, sprayed disinfectant, burned scented candles. None of it made a difference. One night I tried staying awake on purpose. I made strong coffee and sat in the living room with all the lights off, just waiting. At around 1 o'clock, I heard the creaking above the bedroom ceiling. I got up quietly and tiptoed to the bedroom door. I opened it slowly and listened. The noise continued. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up into the attic space. I crawled slowly, breathing through my mouth. I tried to be silent. The smell was thick up there. My eyes watered. I followed the sound. It seemed to come from the far corner. When I reached the peeling wall, I saw footprints appear in front of me. They appeared out of thin air, 2 at a time, as if someone was walking. They hovered above the boards and moved toward me, then past me and back toward the hatch. I stayed still, holding my breath, shining the flashlight on them. They moved in a slow circle, as if pacing. Then they stopped, vanished, and I heard the creaking again, louder this time. I crawled back down as fast as I could. My clothes felt damp from sweat. I locked the hatch with a latch I installed the day before. I pushed a piece of furniture underneath it. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, trying to calm down. My hands shook. My throat felt dry. I stayed there until dawn, listening to the faint creaks and sniffing the foul smell. The next morning, I decided I couldn't live like this. I had to either leave or do something else. But I had a contract, and I had used all my savings for this move. I decided to try to trap whatever it was. I went to a hardware store and bought some cheap motion sensors and a few small cameras. They weren't great, but maybe I could capture something. I installed them around the bedroom and in the hallway. I placed one camera pointing at the hatch. That night, I stayed awake again. I waited in the living room, watching the camera feeds on my laptop. Around 1 a.m, I saw the bedroom camera flicker. The hatch didn't move. The hallway camera picked up no motion. I crept toward the bedroom door and listened. The creaking was there, soft, steady. I looked at the camera feed from the bedroom. I saw my bed. I saw the hatch in the ceiling. Nothing else. But I knew something was there. I could smell it seeping under the door. It burned my nose and made me gag. I opened the door quickly, shining a flashlight around the room. In the center of the bed, I saw 2 footprints floating above the sheets. They were dark and wet. They did not drip. They did not change shape. They just hung there in the air. I moved closer and felt a chill on my skin. My hair stood on end. I tried to take a picture with my phone. The phone showed the bed, but no footprints. I cursed under my breath. My heart hammered. I placed my hand slowly under the footprints. I felt nothing, just cold air. When I pulled my hand back, the footprints disappeared. I stood there, shining the flashlight at the spot. The smell intensified, and I felt bile rise in my throat. I stumbled to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. When I returned to the bedroom, I saw footprints on the floorboards leading from the bed to the wall. They hovered there for a few seconds and then faded. The boards creaked above me. I gritted my teeth and looked up. Nothing moved. Just the old plaster and the hatch. I decided I had to confront the landlord again. I needed to break my lease or force some inspection. The following day, I walked to the landlord's office. I told him there was a serious problem in the apartment, that something was wrong with the attic space. He looked at me like I was being difficult. He said he would send someone to check for mold or leaks next week. I pressed him to come sooner. He refused, saying he was busy. I returned to the apartment. The sun was setting. I felt a knot in my stomach. I tried calling a friend to come over just to have someone there. My friend was busy and said he could drop by tomorrow. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the closed bedroom door. The entire apartment smelled like that awful mix of wet earth and rotten flowers now. I opened all the windows, turned on a small fan, and waited. At around midnight, I realized that no matter what I did, the smell wouldn't go away. I stepped into the hallway and just listened. Everything was silent. I felt pressure in my ears, like when going up in an elevator. I checked my cameras. Nothing unusual. I told myself I would spend the night on the couch again. I grabbed a blanket and lay down, facing the hallway. I left the hallway light on. I must have drifted off. I woke up to the sound of creaking. Not just in the bedroom ceiling now, but closer, maybe right above the living room. I sat up fast, heart pounding. The smell was overwhelming. I turned on my flashlight and aimed it at the living room ceiling. Nothing. Then I looked down at the coffee table in front of me. 2 fresh footprints hovered above the surface, facing me. I rubbed my eyes. They didn't fade. I reached out and passed my hand through them. They vanished on contact. I got up, paced around, opened and closed the front door. The hallway outside was empty. I stood there, breathing hard, deciding what to do. I looked back into the apartment. I saw a new set of footprints on the floor, leading from the living room into the bedroom and then disappearing. The boards creaked softly. My hands were clammy. I knew I couldn't just run. I had nowhere else to go tonight. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there in the hallway, staring at my own front door, thinking about what else I could do. I had no answers. I had only the smell, the creaking, and the footprints appearing and disappearing in front of my eyes. I went back inside, sat on the couch, kept my flashlight and my phone in my hands, and waited for dawn. I didn't sleep. Every few minutes I heard a board creak or caught a whiff of that muddy, rotten smell. But I didn't see any more footprints that night. I stayed still, watching the hallway light, feeling my heart pounding. When the sun rose, I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and left the building. I walked around the block a few times, breathing fresh air. I knew I had to leave the apartment soon. I couldn't live like that. I decided to break the lease no matter what. I didn't know what was in the attic or what those footprints meant. I only knew that they were there. They were real to me and they wouldn't let me sleep. It was enough. I would find a way out. Until then, I would keep the windows open, keep my flashlight close, and try not to panic every time I saw a wet footprint hanging in the air in front of me. I moved into the old stone house because it was cheap, quiet, and far from anyone I knew. I had driven 3 hours along uneven roads, past a few sagging barns, and stopped only once to make sure the car wasn't about to fall apart. The place looked solid enough on the outside. The walls were thick, cold to the touch, and rough. The roof seemed stable. There was a musty smell inside, and the floors creaked under my boots. I didn't see any neighbors when I arrived, just empty fields and a dirt path lined with weeds and fallen branches. I felt a little uneasy, but I told myself it was just the isolation. I needed solitude to sort out my life, and this seemed like the right spot. I had brought only a few things: some clothes, some tools, a couple of chairs, a table, a mattress, and a mirror. I remember placing the mirror in the hallway the day after I arrived. I wanted it there so I could check if I looked halfway presentable whenever I passed through to the front door. The first time I tried to hang it up, the hook on the wall was loose. I fiddled with it, trying to get the mirror straight. The glass caught my face at a strange angle. For a second, I thought my vision was blurry from the dust in the air. I rubbed my eyes and tried again. The reflection made my head look slightly stretched. I moved the mirror to see if it was a trick of the light. I tilted it, stepped back, and leaned in close. My eyes looked off. They were thinner and not round like normal eyes. I moved my head side to side, squinting, but no matter what I did, I didn't see my usual face. I took the mirror down and wiped it with a rag. It was just some old mirror I got from a secondhand shop. I figured maybe it was warped somehow. I held it in my hands, walked to a window, and tilted it under daylight. My face still looked wrong. The shape of my nose shifted and my mouth looked too large. I tried to laugh at myself, but the laughter got stuck in my throat because my reflection's teeth looked sharp at the edges. I checked my actual teeth with my fingers. They were normal. I looked back at the mirror. The reflection was not normal. I put the mirror down. I felt a bit lightheaded. I thought maybe I was dehydrated. I poured a glass of water from the bottle I'd brought and drank it slowly. My head felt heavy, and my neck muscles were tense. I told myself the mirror must have a defect. It was old, and not exactly high quality. I decided to try another reflective surface. I went into the kitchen area and checked the dull metal of the sink. It wasn't as reflective, but I could still see something. My face looked blurred there too, like I was looking at someone else. The outline of my jaw kept shifting. I stepped back, bumped my elbow on a cabinet, and cursed under my breath. I felt a slight panic rising in my chest. I walked outside to get some fresh air. The day was quiet. I stood by the door and looked at the fields around me. There was a broken fence on one side. On the other side, a patch of weeds taller than my knees. My car was still parked near the front, covered in dust. Everything was normal out here. I looked at the car's side mirror. I expected my face to appear normal. Instead, my eyes looked like bright slits again, and my skin looked dull and cracked. I slammed my hand against the car door. The sound echoed in the emptiness. Inside, the hallway felt colder. I tried to ignore it. I thought maybe I had a migraine or something messing with my vision. I tried to do some normal tasks. I unpacked some clothes, folded them, and placed them in a makeshift closet. I checked the bathroom, which had a small, old mirror above the sink. The bathroom was dim because the window was small and partly blocked by dirt. I turned on my flashlight, aimed it at my face in the mirror, and nearly dropped it. I saw my lips stretching open in the reflection, but I was pretty sure my mouth was closed. I leaned in and stared. My reflection's face kept changing shape. I took a step back and felt a sudden wave of nausea. My legs wobbled. I gripped the sink with both hands and swallowed hard. I turned away from the mirror and tried to breathe. I heard a whisper behind me. It sounded like a low voice, but I couldn't make out any words. I spun around. The bathroom was empty except for me. The whispering sound seemed to come from inside the walls. I checked the pipes. They were old and probably rusted, but that wouldn't explain the whisper. I left the bathroom and went back to the hallway. The house felt like it was tilting. I ran my hand along the stone wall. The stones were solid, but my sense of balance felt off. I tried to count my steps from one end of the hallway to the other. 10 steps, then 11 steps on the way back. That made no sense. I counted again. 9 steps one way, 12 steps back. I tried again, slower. I got different numbers each time. My breathing got shallow. I could taste something metallic at the back of my tongue. I decided to avoid mirrors for a while. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to clean up some rooms. The dust in the bedrooms made my throat itch. I opened a window and looked outside. The sun was getting lower. I saw no one around. No houses, no vehicles, nothing. Just fields and some distant shapes of trees. By evening, I was hungry. I heated a can of soup on a portable stove. I ate standing up, staring at the floor because I didn't want to catch my reflection in any surface. I tried to focus on what I could control. I had soup. I had water. I had a flashlight and some batteries. I had my phone, but the signal was weak. I tried calling a friend to say I'd arrived safely, but the call dropped. I tried sending a message. It showed no signal bars. I decided to sleep early. I placed the mattress in one of the rooms without mirrors. It was quiet, but not peaceful. I kept hearing faint sounds like footsteps in the hallway, but whenever I checked, nothing was there. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. My ears kept picking up faint whispering. It was like someone was speaking from behind the walls. My heart was beating fast. My skin felt cold, and my stomach was tight. I forced myself to keep my eyes shut, counting slowly in my head until I drifted off. When I woke up, it was still dark outside. I looked at my phone. The battery was half gone. I turned on the flashlight and checked the time. It was maybe 5 in the morning. I got up and felt a rush of dizziness. My legs felt weak. I steadied myself against the wall. I could smell something damp and sour in the air. I walked slowly to the hallway. The mirror I tried to hang was leaning against the wall. I forced myself to look at it. My reflection was there, but it was moving its mouth slightly as if trying to speak. I felt panic rise in my throat. I picked up the mirror and turned it around so I wouldn't see the glass. I heard the whisper again. It sounded like my name, but I wasn't sure. The voice was too low and too distorted. I checked the front door. It was locked, just as I left it. I unlocked it and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face. My breath was visible in front of me. I walked a few steps until I reached the car. I tried the car's mirror again. My reflection's eyes were glowing faintly and my mouth seemed wider than normal. I looked away. I started the car, thinking I should maybe leave, but I had no other place to go. I came here because I wanted to be alone. Now I was alone and losing my mind. I turned off the car and went back inside. I took the mirror from the hallway and carried it into a closet. I shut the closet door. I wanted no mirrors in sight. That day, I tried to measure the hallway carefully. I used a tape measure. I got different lengths each time. Sometimes the hallway seemed a few inches longer or shorter. The stones felt cold against my fingertips. I pressed my ear to the wall. I heard soft whispering again, too faint to understand. My head hurt. I decided to cover the bathroom mirror with a towel. I removed any shiny objects that could show a reflection. I put them all in a drawer. I wanted no chance of seeing my face in a distorted form. By noon, I felt hungry again. I ate some bread and cheese. I drank water. Outside, the light was bright, but it didn't feel warm. I checked my phone for signal. Nothing. I considered driving back into town. Maybe I should just leave. But I had paid for this place. I wanted to fix it up. I wanted a quiet life. I told myself I would try one more day. I would stay calm and act normal. I tried to do some work around the property. I walked the perimeter, looked at the broken fence, picked up some fallen branches. The physical labor made me sweat. I wiped my forehead and checked the windows from the outside. The glass was dusty, but I could see inside. The hallway looked different from the outside, like it was slightly crooked. I stepped closer, but I couldn't get a good angle. I tried looking at my reflection in the window. I saw only a vague shape. Back inside, I heard creaks coming from the upper floor. I climbed the stairs slowly. My flashlight beam showed old boards and dust. One room had a cracked mirror on the floor, half covered by a piece of cloth. I tried not to look at it. I looked at the wall instead. There were old hooks and nails, maybe from old picture frames. The air smelled stale and unpleasant. My shoulders felt stiff. I decided to drag the cracked mirror into the hallway, face down. I didn't want it in the bedroom. My arms shook a bit as I pulled it out. It scraped along the floor. I felt a sudden jolt in my legs, like I was losing balance. I leaned against the railing of the stairs until the dizziness passed. I thought about sleeping in the car that night, but it would be cramped and uncomfortable. Instead, I locked myself in one of the back rooms, the one with the mattress. I closed the door, checked it twice. There were no mirrors in here. I laid down and stared at the ceiling. I tried not to think. My heart was still beating too fast and my mouth was dry. After some time, I fell asleep. I woke up with a start, feeling like someone had just touched my shoulder. I turned on my flashlight. The room was empty. My chest felt tight. I swallowed hard and rubbed my neck. I heard faint whispering again, this time outside the door. I waited, not moving. My body was tense, my teeth clenched. The whispering stopped after a few seconds. In the morning, I decided to check if maybe I was hallucinating. I thought I could record myself with my phone's camera. I opened the camera app and aimed it at my face. The phone's screen showed something wrong. My face looked twisted. My forehead was too large and my eyes were too narrow. I smiled nervously and the screen showed something that didn't look like a human smile. I felt sweat under my arms. I closed the app and tossed the phone on the mattress. The whispering got worse that day. It started whenever I went near the hallway. It was soft but constant. Sometimes it sounded like breathing. Other times it sounded like a voice trying to form words. I pressed my ear against the stone wall. The stone felt cold. My heart thumped. I whispered back, "Who's there?" No response. Just a faint rustling sound, like dry leaves moving against each other. I checked every corner of the house, looking for hidden speakers, old vents, anything that could cause strange noises. I found nothing. I tried opening the attic hatch, but it was stuck. The ladder felt unstable, and I gave up. I walked around the house outside, checking the walls. They seemed thick and old. I didn't see any cracks that would let in voices. I returned inside, feeling a knot in my stomach. I tried covering every reflective surface. I used towels, sheets, even cardboard. I wanted no chance of seeing that distorted face again. But even without looking, I could feel the dizziness whenever I stood in the hallway. It felt like the space was shifting. I counted steps again. Different numbers every time. I decided to push some furniture around to see if that would change anything. I moved a small table near the window. I dragged a chair to the center of the hallway. I tried to use them as reference points. But no matter how I positioned them, when I turned around and looked back, the arrangement seemed off. The distances felt wrong. My vision blurred at the edges. My stomach clenched, and I gagged, though nothing came out. The whispering was behind me again. I spun around, shining my flashlight. Nothing, just the stone walls and the furniture. My pulse pounded in my ears. I tried speaking normally, just to fill the silence. I said, "I'm here alone. I don't understand what's happening." My voice echoed slightly. No one answered. That afternoon, I decided I couldn't stay here. I had enough gas to get back to the nearest town. I gathered my things. I took my bag and threw in some clothes, my tools, my phone, my flashlight. I would leave the old furniture behind. I went to the front door. I hesitated, then opened it. Outside, the day was bright. The air smelled cleaner. I walked to the car and threw my bag in the trunk. I stopped and looked back at the house. The stone walls looked the same, but I knew what was inside. The distorted reflections, the voices in the walls, the shifting hallways. My hands were shaking, and my mouth was dry. I decided not to look in the car's mirror. I started the engine and left without looking back. I remember the first night I heard it. I had arrived at the old house that afternoon. It belonged to a distant relative. I never really knew the person. The lawyer gave me the deed and the keys. The house was old. It smelled like damp wood and dust. The floors creaked under my shoes. The windows stuck when I tried to open them. There were marks on the walls where old frames used to hang. The air felt heavy, like nobody had lived there for a long time. I walked through each room, checking the furniture and the closets. Most were empty. The basement was the last place I looked. It was dark and smelled worse than the rest of the house. The steps down were uneven, and I had to use my phone's flashlight to see. There was a locked cabinet or closet near the far end of the basement. The door was about chest high, with a small brass handle and an old-fashioned keyhole. I tried to pull it open. It didn't budge. I pressed my ear against it. It was silent inside. I didn't hear anything, but I felt curious about it. I found a toolbox upstairs and brought it down. I forced the lock with a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. The metal parts snapped, and the door swung open. Inside, there was nothing. No shelves, no boxes, just a hollow space. It was about 3 feet deep. The walls inside were dark wood. The corners looked weird, like they were uneven or warped. I shined my phone's light inside. The beam didn't show anything unusual besides the odd shape of the interior. The wood smelled musty. I leaned forward, tapped the inside walls. They sounded solid enough. I didn't see any hidden compartments. I felt disappointed. I expected something like old letters, jewelry, or at least some junk. Instead, just emptiness. I closed the door. The hinges creaked. They looked rusty. I decided I would clean the basement another day. I locked up the house, went out to buy some basic groceries, and came back as night fell. I put some blankets on one of the old beds upstairs. The pipes still worked, though the water smelled metallic. I ate a sandwich, drank some water, and sat on a wooden chair in the living room. The night was quiet. I had a single lamp on, and my eyes kept drifting to the basement door. I tried to ignore it, but I felt uneasy, like I had disturbed something down there. I went to sleep around midnight. The old mattress felt lumpy. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak. I started to drift off, and then I heard something. It was a short, hollow laugh coming from below. It was faint, but it echoed just enough for me to notice. I sat up. I listened hard. The house fell silent again. I rubbed my eyes and waited. After about a minute, I heard it again. It sounded like laughter, but not quite human. It was a hollow, dry sound, like air passing through a cracked pipe. It came from the basement, I was sure of it. I felt my skin prickling. My hands tightened around the edges of the blanket. I told myself it was probably just the pipes or something settling. I wasn't used to the house's noises, but the sound had a human quality to it. It rose and fell in a pattern that reminded me of a snicker or a chuckle. I got up, grabbed my phone, and walked slowly toward the basement door. I switched on the basement light. A single bulb lit the bottom of the stairs. I stepped down, carefully, one step at a time. I reached the bottom. The sound was gone. I walked to the closet. The door was still open. I bent down and looked inside. I didn't see anything. I aimed my phone's light inside. Just dark corners. Then I thought I saw something shift. A shape at the far corner seemed to pull back, like a body twisting. I jerked backward and bumped my head on the top of the closet frame. The light from my phone shook, and when I looked again, the space was empty. I breathed through my mouth, trying to keep quiet and steady. I didn't hear laughter now, just my own breathing. I stood up, grabbed a spare padlock I had seen in the toolbox, and locked the closet door. I didn't care if there was nothing inside. I didn't like the feeling I got from it. I went back upstairs, turned off the basement light, and tried to sleep again. It took me a long time, but eventually, I drifted off. The next morning, I checked the closet again. I expected to see my lock intact, and it was. I opened it. The closet was empty. I touched the inside walls. They felt normal. No secret panels, no draft. I checked the back wall with a hammer, tapping lightly. It was solid. I tried to shake off the feeling from the night before. Maybe I was half asleep, imagining things. I spent the day cleaning the kitchen. I dragged out old chairs and wiped off mold. I tested the stove, the fridge, the sink. I tried to settle in. Around noon, I heard a noise coming from the basement again. It sounded like metal scraping metal. I walked down and found the closet door slightly ajar. The padlock lay on the floor. The metal had snapped. I stood there, staring at the broken lock. My hands felt cold. The closet door creaked as it moved, even though I wasn't touching it. I pushed it shut again. I found a heavier lock in the garage and a chain. I looped the chain around the handles and secured it as tight as I could. I tugged it. It held firm. I left the basement. For the rest of the afternoon, I stayed upstairs. Around 3 in the afternoon, I heard the laughter again, very faint. I ignored it. My stomach felt tight. I drank water and waited for it to stop. Eventually, it did. By evening, the house felt colder. I turned on a space heater I found in a closet. I sat in the living room looking at my phone. I had no TV, no internet yet. Outside, the street was quiet. I listened carefully. For a few hours, I heard nothing. Then, after midnight, the laughter returned. This time it sounded closer to my own voice. I froze. I strained to listen. The laugh rose and fell like before, but now the tone matched my own pitch. It was as if someone tried to copy me. I walked downstairs again, holding a flashlight this time. I wore heavy boots just in case. I reached the basement. The chain on the closet door rattled. I stared at it. The door shook a little, as if something inside pushed against it. I stepped closer and put my ear against the door. I heard breathing. It was subtle and uneven. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to open the closet again. I removed the chain and pulled the door open fast, shining the flashlight inside. I saw something move in the far corner, something with a bent shape. It moved out of the light. I jumped back, slamming the door shut and fumbling with the chain. The laughter came again right behind the door. It sounded exactly like me now, repeating my own small grunts and gasps. My hands shook. I got the chain back on and ran upstairs. I locked the basement door. I sat in the hallway, breathing hard. I tried to make sense of it. Something was inside that closet. I had no idea what it was. It didn't feel normal. It didn't feel safe. I didn't sleep much that night. When I did sleep, I dreamed of dark corners and rusted hinges. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and sore shoulders. I walked around the house, checking the doors and windows. Everything was normal except the basement closet. I thought about calling someone. But who would I call? The police? An exterminator? I didn't even know what I was dealing with. I had no proof. Just strange noises and something I thought I saw in the dark. I decided to inspect the closet again, this time during the day, with more tools. I grabbed a crowbar and a flashlight. I walked down, removed the chain, and opened the door. The space looked empty again. I tapped the walls. I felt for loose panels. I found nothing. I stayed there for a full minute, staring inside, trying to see any movement. I saw nothing. No smell either. Just stale air. I closed it again and put the chain back. I felt watched, even if I didn't see anything. That afternoon, I sat in the living room and tried to read an old magazine I found in a drawer. I couldn't focus. I kept glancing toward the basement door. Around 2 p.m., I heard faint shuffling sounds downstairs. They lasted only a few seconds. I tried to ignore them. My stomach growled, but I wasn't hungry. I drank some tap water and waited for evening to come. The daylight made me feel safer, but I knew I couldn't avoid nightfall forever. As it got dark, I turned on every light in the house. The electric bill would be high, but I didn't care. I even plugged in a string of old Christmas lights I found in a box just to have more light. Around 10 p.m., I heard a quiet knock from the basement. It was soft, but steady. I listened. Knock, knock, knock. It came from inside the closet. I walked to the basement door and stood there, not going down, just listening. The knocking stopped. Then the laughter came again. It sounded so much like my own voice that I felt my face grow hot. I switched on the basement light and shouted, "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. I waited, holding the banister. My heart was beating fast. After a long pause, I heard a rasping sound, as if someone tried to speak. It was muffled by the closet door. I took one step down, then another, until I stood halfway down the stairs. I called out again, "I know you're there." A response came, a voice that mimicked my words. It sounded like a recording of me, played back through a broken speaker. "I know you're there," it said, but with uneven pauses, like it hadn't mastered speech. I felt sweat on my forehead. My throat felt dry. I backed up the stairs and locked the basement door. I wanted to leave the house, but I had nowhere else to go. I had moved in. My belongings were mostly there. I also felt a strange pull. I wanted to know what was inside that closet, but I was terrified. I tried to sleep in the living room with the lamp on. I dragged a small couch near the front door just in case. I dozed off, then woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of scraping wood. It came from the basement, traveling up through the floor. I felt the vibrations under my feet. I stood up, not sure what to do. The laughter came again. It was louder now, echoing in the basement. I pressed my ear to the floor. I heard something moving inside that closet, pushing at the walls or the door, straining the hinges. Then I heard my own voice again, repeated in fragments. "I know you're there. Who's there? Who's there? I know." It kept cycling through phrases I had spoken before, as if practicing them. My teeth clenched. My jaw ached. I ran to the garage and searched for something stronger. I found a set of heavy-duty chains and a steel padlock. I took them downstairs, forced myself to open that closet door one last time, and I aimed my flashlight inside. The inside walls seemed to shift in the beam of light. I could swear I saw the wood bending, but maybe it was my shaking hand. I spotted a faint outline near the top corner. It looked like a twisted limb or a thin body part pulling away from the light. I slammed the door, wrapped the chains around it multiple times, and locked them. I pulled hard. The door creaked but stayed shut. I went back upstairs. I decided I wouldn't open that closet again. I would seal the basement if I had to. I spent the next day buying supplies. I got thick boards, nails, a hammer, and even some wedges. I didn't want to spend another night with that thing. When I got home, I heard something inside the basement, but I ignored it. I ate a can of beans cold, drank more water, and waited until the next morning. When the sun rose, I went downstairs with the boards and nails. The door to the closet rattled when I approached it. I heard weak laughter behind it, but it sounded frustrated. It repeated short phrases in my voice like "open it," "come here," and "look inside." Each phrase sounded choppy and forced. I laid the boards across the door frame. I hammered them in place. I used wedges at the bottom and top. I pulled on the boards to test them. They held firm. I went back upstairs and did the same at the top of the basement stairs. I sealed it off. By the time I finished, I was sweaty and tired. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. For the next few hours, I listened. The laughter continued, then faded. I heard scraping and knocking against the closet door. I heard more attempts at speech. It sounded like a bad recording of my voice, repeating words out of order. It never formed a real sentence. I listened to it grow quieter as the day went on. That night I slept in the bedroom upstairs. I left the lights on. I held a crowbar near me. I did not hear laughter. I did not hear knocking. I tried to relax, but my body felt stiff. Every noise made me jump. The next morning I listened at the top of the basement stairs. I heard nothing. I considered leaving the house. I considered selling it. But I didn't want to deal with questions. Who would believe me? I stayed in that house for a few more days, waiting to see if the noises would return. They did not. The basement stayed quiet. Sometimes at night, I imagined I heard a faint sigh or a whisper. But when I held my breath and listened carefully, there was nothing. I did not remove the boards. I never opened the closet door again. I left it chained and sealed away. If something lived inside it, it had no shape I could understand. It tried to copy me, tried to learn my voice, but I never gave it a chance to come out. It could stay in there, sealed away. In the following weeks, I moved most of my belongings into the upper floors. I kept the basement sealed. I avoided that part of the house. When I had to go near it, I went quickly and quietly. The hinges on the closet door never moved again. The laughter never returned. I lived upstairs, used only the upstairs bathroom, and kept the lights on at night. I never let the house go completely dark. I never forgot that hollow laugh or the twisted shape I saw inside that empty space. It was real. I saw it. I heard it. I forced it back. And now I live here, alone, with that locked door in the basement, never opening it again. I first noticed the painting on a Wednesday afternoon. I was walking along the narrow corridor that leads to my apartment. The hallway was dark as usual. The light above my door had been flickering for weeks. The building owner never came around to fix anything. My apartment was on the 4th floor near the end of the corridor. On that day, I stopped in front of a picture frame I had never seen before. It was hanging on the wall about 6 feet from my door. It looked like a smudged painting, just a blurry mess of dark colors. I didn't remember anyone placing it there. It had no label and no glass cover. It smelled faintly of old paint. I shrugged and kept walking. I didn't think much of it. It was just a weird detail in a building full of weird details. After a few days, I started to notice changes. Each time I passed that painting, it seemed more defined. On Thursday, I caught a glimpse of a rough shape inside the frame. It was like a faint outline of a head. I thought maybe I was imagining it. On Friday night after work, it looked clearer. I paused and stared at it for a moment. I could see something like a human face, but the brush strokes were uneven, and the colors were still dull. I leaned in, squinting. It made me uncomfortable. It looked unfinished, but I could feel that it was getting closer to something recognizable. By Saturday afternoon, the painting looked almost like a portrait of a man. I noticed the shape of the jawline and the shadow around the eyes. It made the small hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It reminded me of my own face in a vague way, but I told myself that was nonsense. I touched the edge of the frame. I expected to feel a nail or some bump holding it up. The frame was smooth right against the wall. I pulled gently, but it wouldn't move. It was like it was glued there. I frowned and tried to push my fingernails under the frame's edge. Nothing. It didn't budge. I gave up and went inside my apartment. Inside, I tossed my jacket on the couch and grabbed a beer. My apartment was cramped. The ceiling was low, and the walls were thin. That night, I kept thinking about the painting. I got up a few times just to step out and look at it. Each time, the face became more detailed. By midnight, I could see it was definitely a man's face. It had short, dark hair, a rough stubble, and a tired expression. When I leaned in very close, I noticed it looked a lot like me. Same nose shape, same lines at the corners of the eyes. On Sunday morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. I went outside and stood in front of the painting again. Now it looked exactly like me. It was like someone had painted my portrait without my knowledge. I looked at the features one by one. The painting's eyes followed me. When I shifted to the left, the eyes seemed to track my movement. I stepped to the right and the same thing happened. I felt a tightness in my chest, my palms got sweaty. My throat felt dry. I reached out and pressed the frame hard. It stayed in place, stuck to the wall. I tried pulling again, using more force. The frame didn't move even a millimeter. It might as well have been part of the wall itself. I went back inside and tried to ignore it. I watched TV, I ate some old leftovers, I drank another beer, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. In the late afternoon, I stepped out to check once more. The painting's face now had a slight frown. It matched my own mood. I felt my heartbeat picking up speed. The face was reacting to me. That's how it looked. When I moved closer, the painting's expression grew tense. When I backed away, it relaxed a bit. My forehead felt damp with sweat. I tried to talk to someone about it. I ran into my neighbor from 2 doors down that evening. He was a quiet guy, kept to himself. I asked him, "Hey, did you see that painting near my apartment?" He looked at me with confusion. He shrugged and said he hadn't noticed anything. I knew he passed that spot every day, but somehow he didn't see it. I asked another neighbor, a woman who lived across the hall. She just shook her head. She looked tired and didn't want to talk. It was strange. Monday morning I woke up early. I hadn't slept well. I kept dreaming about the painting. In my dream, it spoke to me, but I couldn't remember the words. I stepped into the hallway and found that the painting's eyes were half closed, like it had been sleeping. When I approached, the eyes opened slowly. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was no sound, no voice, just the faint odor of paint and old plaster. I felt trapped. My apartment was at the end of this hallway, and I had to pass this painting every time I left or came back. I decided to try removing it by force. I went inside, grabbed a screwdriver and a small crowbar I used once to open a stuck window. I stepped into the hallway. I put the tip of the screwdriver between the frame and the wall and pushed. The wood didn't crack. The wall didn't chip. The frame didn't move. I tried the crowbar with more force, pressing and twisting. My arm muscles strained. Nothing happened. It was like the frame had merged with the wall. I tried kicking it. I felt pain shoot up my leg and had to hop around cursing under my breath. The painting remained untouched. I stared at it. The painting stared back. Now it looked annoyed. The eyebrows were drawn together. The mouth was a thin line. I could see a tension in the painted face. My heart was beating fast. I felt a knot in my stomach. I wanted to run, but I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't just leave my apartment. I paid rent here, and I had nowhere else lined up. I didn't have much money. I worked at a warehouse loading boxes all day. I couldn't afford to move out without notice. Besides, who would believe me if I said I had to leave because a painting on the wall was alive? Over the next few days, I tried different things. I draped a blanket over the painting. For a moment, the hallway looked normal. But when I left and came back an hour later, the blanket was on the floor. I hung a sheet of cardboard over it with duct tape, pressing the tape firmly against the wall. When I came back later, the cardboard had fallen. The duct tape lay in dried, curled strips on the ground. The painting was always visible. It was always there, watching me. I tried ignoring it. That was hard. Every time I passed by, I could feel the painted eyes on me. I could sense the expression changing. When I was nervous or in a hurry, the painting looked alarmed. When I was tired, it looked exhausted. One night, I came home late, frustrated after a long shift. I stood in front of the painting and glared at it. I felt ridiculous. It was just paint on a wall. But the face glared back. It matched my angry stare. I clenched my fists. My head felt hot. I reached out and tried to scrape the surface of the painting with my fingernails. My nails only scratched at dry paint. I tried spitting on it. My spit ran down the frame and dripped onto the floor. The painting didn't change. I looked at my own reflection in a piece of glass nearby, just a broken panel from a window frame leaning against the wall. I looked tired and desperate. Days turned into a week. My sleep got worse. Every time I tried to rest, I imagined those painted eyes watching me. The hallway light still flickered. Sometimes late at night, I thought I heard a faint scraping sound outside my door. I would open the door and see nothing but the painting. Always the painting. The eyes never closed fully now. They stayed half open, as if always on guard. I tried talking to the landlord. He didn't answer his phone. I left messages. I wrote a note and slipped it under his door on the first floor. He never replied. I tried asking other tenants, but most avoided long conversations. The building felt empty. The neighbors who did talk to me seemed unaware of anything strange. They never commented on the painting. It was right there, impossible to miss, but they acted like it wasn't. I felt alone. The more I looked at the painting, the more details I noticed. The brush strokes on the cheeks, the uneven texture of the paint around the mouth, the subtle shading around the eyes. I even recognized a small scar above the left eyebrow that I had from a childhood accident. I saw the faint outline of my hairline, the same pattern of stubble on my chin. It was me. There was no doubt about it. The painting was my face. Sometimes I tried to avoid looking at it by walking past it very quickly. When I did that, I felt a strange sensation, like a static charge in the air. My hair stood on end. My ears rang slightly. The painting's features seemed to shift at the corner of my eye. I could never catch it moving directly, but I felt it adjusting itself to my pace. If I stopped suddenly, the features would freeze in place. If I backed up, the eyebrows would rise a bit or the mouth would tighten. On another night, I got frustrated and pounded on the wall next to the painting. The noise echoed through the corridor. It sounded hollow and cheap. I yelled at it, my voice cracking. I said, "What do you want from me?" I waited, breathing hard. There was no answer, of course. It was just a painting. But as I stared, I saw the corners of its mouth pull back slightly, like a smirk. I turned around and went inside my apartment. I locked the door. My legs felt weak. I sat on the floor and held my head in my hands. I couldn't think of a solution. I couldn't remove it. I couldn't cover it. I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. In the following days, I tried to focus on my routine. I got up, ate breakfast, went to work, came back. But every time I walked that corridor, I felt heavy pressure in my chest. My heart pounded. My hands shook. I noticed my appetite shrinking. My head ached more often. I thought about calling the police or a maintenance crew. But what would I say? There is a painting stuck to the wall outside my apartment that looks like me and keeps changing its expression. They would think I was insane. And even if they came, what would they do? It wasn't a crime to have a painting in a hallway. Nobody was dying. Nobody was hurt. It made no sense. I decided to try something else. I got a kitchen knife and tried to cut into the painting's surface. When I pressed the knife against the painted face, the blade met something like hardened plaster. I pushed harder, and the blade chipped. I pulled the knife back and looked at the small dent in the paint. It sealed itself slowly as I watched. The paint smoothed out. The scratch vanished. I stared in disbelief and stabbed again. The wall held firm, and the painting's surface repaired itself each time. I ended up with a dull knife and no progress. My nights became a routine of restless tossing. I turned the TV's volume up to cover any sounds. I kept my apartment door locked. I listened for footsteps, but I only heard silence or the quiet hum of the old building's pipes. Each morning, the painting greeted me with a face that mirrored my condition. If I was sleepy, it looked half awake. If I was anxious, it looked strained. The tension in my chest never went away. I sweated more, my clothes stuck to my back. I developed a nervous habit of rubbing my hands together. My skin felt rough. I checked the painting's surface again and again, hoping it would fade, but it remained solid and detailed. At some point, I tried not looking at it at all. I tried walking with my eyes on the floor. When I did that, I could still feel its presence. I heard a soft crackling, like dried paint flaking off. I smelled a faint odor of turpentine or something similar. When I raised my head, the painting stared straight at me, the face calm and patient, as if waiting. I looked down again and hurried inside. My breath came in short gasps. Time blurred. I lost track of how many days had passed since I first saw the painting. I didn't go out much besides going to work. I avoided talking to anyone in the building. My back ached from tension. I started drinking more before going to sleep, hoping it would help me relax. It didn't. The painting stayed fresh and clear, unaffected by my attempts to ignore it. One evening I tried calling my brother. He lived in another state. I said I was having problems. He asked what kind of problems. I didn't know how to explain. I just said my apartment building was giving me trouble. He told me to find a better place. I said I didn't have the money. He said he couldn't help me right now. That was it. I didn't mention the painting. I felt stupid talking about it. I hung up feeling more alone than before. At some point, I realized I had to live with this. I had no way to remove it. I had no one to turn to. I avoided telling my coworkers because they would laugh or think I was nuts. I kept passing by it every day. Each time I did, the painted face looked at me, hungry for my attention. I had to pretend it wasn't there. I had to keep going. I had to stay quiet. I had to accept it. It wouldn't leave and I couldn't run. I didn't know what it wanted, but it was always there, watching, waiting. I had no answers. I just knew that every time I walked down that narrow corridor, my own face stared back at me from the wall, and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. I wake up with a dry throat and a tight feeling in my chest. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth, and all I can think about is getting water. I sit up, swing my legs off the bed, and stand. My apartment is silent, and I can see a faint glow under my bedroom door. I'm used to that. The hallway always has a small nightlight plugged into the outlet at the end. Normally, the walk from my bedroom to the kitchen takes just a handful of steps. Tonight, though, I notice something that stops me. The door feels heavy when I pull it open, like the hinges got stiff overnight. When I step into the hallway, I pause. I look ahead. The kitchen door should be straight down a short hall, maybe 15 feet away. Right now it looks more like 30 or 40 feet. I can't understand why it seems longer, but it does. I take a few steps forward. The floor under my feet feels cold. I glance down and see the same beige carpet, but something about it looks off. There are dark patches on it. They're faint, just a few irregular shapes that weren't there before. I bend down and rub my finger on one. It feels dry. I bring my finger close to my face, but I can't smell anything. My mind says maybe it's just a shadow or a stain I never noticed. I stand up straight and keep walking. The corridor feels different tonight. The air is stale. I can smell dust and something like old wood. Normally I can see the kitchen light if I leave it on, but right now, there's only my small nightlight behind me and a very faint flicker ahead. I move slowly. My feet make a soft shuffling noise. The carpet feels thinner with each step, as if I'm walking on a rougher surface now. I count my steps. I know the hallway well. After 8 steps, I should be right at the kitchen doorway, but after 8 steps, I'm still not there. I take a few more. 10 steps. 12 steps. The door still looks too far away. I stop and turn around, looking back at my bedroom. It's still there, and the nightlight near it glows faintly. I'm sure I haven't turned anywhere. This hall is straight and short. There are no corners or side doors. At least there shouldn't be any side doors. But when I look to my right now, I see a faint outline of what looks like a door frame. It's barely visible, but it's there. I know for a fact that there's supposed to be only one door on this stretch, my bedroom door. My stomach twists. I stand still and listen. At first I don't hear anything except my own breathing. Then I catch a sound. It's a whisper, very low. It sounds like my name. My name is short, and I know what it sounds like when someone says it. This whisper isn't just a random hiss. It has the shape of my name. I feel sweat forming on my forehead and on the back of my neck. I call out, "Hello?" My voice sounds too loud. It just echoes slightly, and then everything goes quiet again. I walk forward a little more, trying to reach the kitchen door. The overhead light in the hallway flickers. It's just a small ceiling lamp, normally steady, but now it's flickering like a dirty fluorescent tube. The light seems to come and go, and each time it goes out, the hall looks darker and longer. Each time it flickers back, I see more odd details. The walls seem grimy. I can see scratches on the paint and small chips in the plaster that were never there before. There's a musty smell I can't quite place. I swallow and press on. When I finally reach what I think might be the kitchen door, I realize it's not my kitchen door at all. It's just a dark wooden door closed. There's no knob. I touch it. The wood feels rough and dusty. I pull my hand back and wipe it on my t-shirt. I look to the left, expecting to see my kitchen at last. Instead, I see another stretch of hallway. My heart starts beating faster. I step back, bumping my heel against something. I turn around, and there's a small cabinet or table against the wall. I don't own this piece of furniture. I've never seen it before. It looks old, with peeling paint and a drawer that won't close all the way. The whispering starts again. I can't make out words, except it keeps sounding like my name. I say, "Who's there?" My voice cracks. No one answers. I feel cold air against my arms, and I notice the hairs on them standing up. I want to go back to my bedroom. I turn around and walk back, counting my steps. I think if I retrace my path, I can return to my bed and pretend this never happened. But when I turn, the corridor looks slightly different. The night light near my bedroom door is still visible, but dimmer now. It looks farther away, maybe 20 steps instead of 10. I walk quickly, keeping my eyes on that small light. My legs feel tense and my breathing is shallow. My heart thumps hard in my chest. It's just a hallway, I tell myself. It can't change length. But it is. It's not making sense. I reach my bedroom door after more steps than it should take. I grab the doorknob. It's my door, the same cheap metal knob, the same wood grain. I rush inside, close the door, and lean against it. My room looks normal. The bed is there. The small dresser is there. My phone is where I left it. I sit on the edge of the bed, breathing hard. My throat is still dry, but I'm not going back out there tonight. I decide to wait until morning. I turn on my bedside lamp and watch the time on my phone. It's just after 3 in the morning. The next 3 hours go by slowly. I try to read something on my phone, but I can't focus. I keep glancing at the door, half expecting it to open by itself. At dawn, around 6:30, I open my bedroom door. The hallway is normal again. I walk to the kitchen in a handful of steps, exactly as it should be. No extra doors, no stains, no furniture that doesn't belong. I stand in my kitchen, turn on the faucet, and drink. The water tastes normal. I look back at the hallway. It looks just like it always does. Everything is calm now. That day I try to forget about it. I go about my routine. I make coffee. I eat some cereal. I watch some TV. And I check my emails. But I can't stop thinking about last night. I keep telling myself it was just a dream. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Still, I feel uneasy. That night, when I get ready for bed, I leave the kitchen light on. It's bright and steady, and I think that if I wake up thirsty, I'll see the kitchen light and know exactly where it is. But when I do wake up in the middle of the night, I see the light under my bedroom door flickering. The clock says 2:15. My mouth is dry again, but I'm not sure if I want to get up. I lie there, feeling my heart start to beat harder. I can sense something is off. I finally get out of bed and open the door a crack. The hallway is dim. I had left the kitchen light on, but it's not shining through as it should. Instead, I see a faint, uneven glow. I open the door wider and step out. Immediately, I feel cold air on my skin. The floor feels rough again, and there are dark marks that look like stains or burns on the carpet. I look up and down the hall. It seems longer again. I tell myself to test this out. I count the steps carefully. 1, 2, 3. I look up. The kitchen door looks far away. 4, 5, 6. The hallway light flickers overhead. The bulb buzzes softly. 7, 8, 9. I stop and look behind me. My bedroom door looks distant now, maybe as far as the kitchen door should be. I reach out and touch the wall. It feels solid, but the paint has a rough texture. I scratch it with my fingernail. A small flake of paint falls off. I've never seen paint flake off my hallway walls before. I try to stay calm and move forward. I'm determined to reach the kitchen this time. I keep walking, step after step. The corridor seems to stretch. Every time I think I'm getting closer to the kitchen, the perspective shifts. I see another strange door on my left. This one has a knob. I try to open it, hoping maybe I can shortcut my way to another part of the apartment, but it's locked. I listen at the door and hear a faint shuffling sound, like someone moving inside. I say, "Who's in there?" No reply, just a muffled scrape. The whispering starts again. It's coming from behind me this time. I spin around. I see a shape move across the corridor, just at the edge of the flickering light. I can't see details, just a vague figure stepping out of view. My chest feels tight. My breathing is quick and shallow. I want to run back to my room, but I'm not sure which way to go now. The hallway looks symmetrical, with a door at each end. The small nightlight I left near my bedroom is gone. Or maybe I can't see it anymore. I decide to pick a direction and move. I choose the direction I think leads back to my room. I walk fast, almost running. My feet shuffle on the carpet, and I can hear my own breathing, loud and nervous. The light overhead flickers again, and when it goes dark for a second, I hear a whisper right next to my ear. I jump and nearly slip, but when the light comes back, there's nothing there. I clench my fists and keep going. I reach a door that looks like my bedroom door. The handle feels right. I turn it and step inside. It's my bedroom. I recognize the bed and the lamp. I close the door behind me, my heart still racing. The clock shows it's around 4 in the morning. I sit on the bed, stare at the floor, and try to calm down. I don't sleep at all for the rest of the night. I just sit there waiting for the sun to come up. When the sky gets light, I open my door and see my normal hallway again. The kitchen is a short walk away. No stains, no extra doors, no flickering light. I can't keep living like this. I try to find a reason. Maybe there's something wrong with my eyes or my mind. I check online for stories about hallways that seem to stretch at night. I don't find anything that makes sense. I consider calling a friend, but what would I say? My hallway grows longer at night, and there are strange doors that vanish in the morning. They would think I'm losing it. I try to record it with my phone's camera. The third night I wake up again. It's 2:30. I open my bedroom door and hold my phone up, recording as I step into the hallway. I'm shaking a bit, and I can see my phone screen shows the image. It looks dim. I take a few steps forward, and sure enough, the hall looks long again. I whisper to myself, describing what I see. I mention the stains on the floor, the flickering light, the extra doors. I hear a whisper calling my name again, and I spin around, pointing my phone at empty space. After a few minutes, I retreat to my bedroom. I lock the door and sit down on the bed. My heart is racing and my skin feels clammy. I try to play back the video. The screen shows my hallway, but it looks normal on the video. It's just a dark corridor with my bedroom door at one end and my kitchen at the other. No extra doors, no flickering light, no stains, nothing strange. I watch the video again and again, and it's always the same. It doesn't match what I just experienced. I feel trapped. Either I'm losing my mind or the building is doing something that can't be explained. I decide to do a test. The next day, I measure the hallway. From my bedroom door to my kitchen door, It's 15 feet. I mark the walls lightly with pencil. A small line at the start, one at the middle and one at the end. That night, I wake up at around 3. I open my bedroom door with a flashlight in hand. The corridor is dim. I shine the flashlight on the walls. The pencil marks are gone. The walls look different. The texture is rough. I walk carefully, shining the light on the floor. The stains are back, dark and irregular. I run my hand along the wall as I move forward. The wall feels slightly damp and cold. After about what should be 15 feet, I'm not at my kitchen. I just see more hallway stretching into darkness. The flashlight beam is weak and seems swallowed by the darkness ahead. I hear the whispering again. It's all around me, soft but distinct. I feel something light brush against my shoulder, but when I spin around, there's only empty space. My heartbeat pounds in my ears. I feel sweat running down my back. I walk faster, shining the flashlight side to side, looking for anything I recognize. There's a door on my left. I reach out and grab the knob. It turns this time. I open it. There's a small closet-like space inside. I point my flashlight in. I see a few old coats hanging on hooks. They're not mine. They're musty and torn. I back away, close the door, and keep moving. The flickering overhead light goes out completely now, leaving only my flashlight beam. The whispering grows louder. I start muttering to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." Under my breath, trying to stay calm. I walk until I feel my legs getting tired. Eventually, I turn around and walk back the way I came, trying to find my bedroom door again. After what feels like a long time, I spot something familiar. A faint glow that must be my bedroom lamp showing through the crack under the door. I hurry toward it, ignoring the whispers behind me. I open the door, step inside, and slam it shut. My chest feels tight and my hands are shaking. I sit on the bed feeling dizzy. The clock reads 4:30 in the morning. I stay awake until sunrise, just staring at the door, waiting. As soon as it's bright outside, I open the door. The hallway is back to normal. The pencil marks are there exactly where I drew them. Everything looks fine. At this point, I can't deny that something is happening to me during these late hours. I know I'm seeing and feeling it, but if I try to show anyone else, it disappears. It makes me feel isolated and confused. I start to dread going to sleep at night. I try leaving every light in the apartment on, but it doesn't help. When I wake up at night, the hallway is always dark and twisted. The length is never consistent, the stains appear and vanish. The whispering never says anything clear except my name, and the strange doors never lead anywhere useful. They just confirm that whatever is happening at night isn't normal. The next few nights, I stop trying to reach the kitchen. If I feel thirsty, I just wait until morning. I don't want to move around, but even staying still doesn't help. One night, I wake up and see that my bedroom doorknob is rattling softly, as if someone on the other side is testing it. The whispering is louder than ever. I sit on my bed, holding my phone's flashlight, watching the knob tremble. I call out, "Go away." The rattling stops. Then I hear footsteps moving away down the hall. When I check in the morning, the hallway is normal again, and I find no footprints, no marks. Now I never wake up rested. I'm always tense. I think about moving out, but it's not easy. I have a lease and no extra money. During the day, the place is normal, quiet and ordinary. But at night, everything changes. I don't know if I'm going crazy or if the building is messing with me when I'm most vulnerable. I do know that each night the hall tries to keep me inside it, stretching out the distance, rearranging itself, and refusing to behave like a normal hallway. I know what I see and hear and feel. No matter how normal it looks at sunrise, I can't forget the long nights when I stand in the corridor, listening to those whispers and feeling the cold floor under my feet. Too scared to keep walking. Too confused to understand why this is happening to me. I pushed open a loose metal grate behind a boarded-up building in the old part of town. I was looking for a place to avoid people. I wanted somewhere quiet and strange. I didn't expect to find a narrow passage leading underground, but once I saw it, I kept going. The steps were cracked stone. The air smelled like old paper and dust. I held my phone flashlight in front of me, but the light flickered. The battery was fine earlier, so I felt uneasy. I moved slowly, tapping my toe on each step before committing my full weight. I heard no voices. I felt the temperature drop as I went deeper. At the bottom, I saw a heavy wooden door with iron hinges. It groaned when I pushed it. Inside, there was a large chamber with shelves in every direction. They reached from the floor to a low, arched ceiling. There were no windows, just stone walls. The place smelled like wax and mold. I saw candles on iron sconces and on small tables. The flames were still, not bending or shrinking. The wicks looked unused, like they were new. The candles never seemed to burn down. I didn't touch them, but I leaned in to see if the flame was real. It felt warm, but I noticed the wick didn't blacken. I turned around and realized I couldn't see the door anymore. The shelves formed a kind of maze. I felt a chill run along my forearms. I gripped my phone, but the flashlight was dead. I checked it twice. The battery was drained. I put the phone back in my pocket and tried to follow the candlelight. The shelves were all dark wood, maybe oak. They were loaded with books that had no titles on the spines, just plain leather or cloth bindings. Some were brown, some were black, some were faded gray. There was no clear order. I reached out and picked one randomly. The cover was smooth and smelled like old glue. I opened it. The pages were empty at first, just blank. I flipped a few pages and then I saw small black stains. They spread across the paper as I watched. I held the book close to my face and saw words forming, but they were messy, smudged. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of it. After a few seconds, the words sharpened. They spelled out my first name. It was my name, no doubt about it. I stepped back and scanned the rest of the page. There were lines describing a man with my face and my clothing in a room I didn't recognize. I slammed the book shut. I felt my chest tighten. I whispered to myself that maybe it was a coincidence. I pulled another book from the shelf. Same thing. Blank pages, then stains, then words and images. Again, my name was there. It described me walking through a market I'd never visited. It mentioned me speaking to strangers about things I never said. The details were weird. I read about myself doing things that didn't fit my life. The more I read, the more I felt sweat collect at my temples. I put the book back. I tried another one. This time I saw something like a moving image, like ink forming pictures. I saw my own face. I saw myself sitting at a table in a room with concrete walls. I saw me talking without sound. My lips were moving. The text described me laughing at something that made no sense. I closed it. I stood there, breathing through my mouth, trying to stay calm. I decided to leave. I walked back the way I thought I came in. I passed rows of shelves, all with identical candles and books with no titles. After some turns, I found the door. I climbed the steps and came out through that metal grate. It was still dusk outside. I checked my phone and the battery read full again. I got home, took off my coat, and tried to tell myself I imagined it. But I couldn't forget the smell of the place, the sound of my footsteps on stone, the weight of those strange books. The next day I tried to ignore it, but after work I went back. I found the alley, the boarded-up building, the grate. The passage was still there. I made my way down. Inside, the candles still burned, unchanged. I went to the same shelf. I grabbed a book. This time I turned the pages slowly. The text formed again. It showed me a version of my life that made no sense. I saw references to events that never happened. It mentioned my old apartment, but with details that didn't match reality. It said I had rearranged my furniture in ways I never did. It said I stayed awake at night watching people through my window. I never did that. My stomach tightened. I felt a tremor in my fingers. I tried to rip a page out, but the paper was tougher than normal paper. It felt like hide or something thick. It wouldn't tear. The edge wouldn't even crease. I slammed the book on a shelf. It didn't make much noise. I picked another book and carried it out. I took it with me. Once outside, I opened it under normal light. The pages were blank, totally empty. Nothing moved, nothing formed. I scratched at them and sniffed them. It was just old paper. Confused, I put it in my bag and went home. At home, I tried to show it to a friend who came over that night. I opened the book in front of him. Blank. He said it looked normal, but old. I told him I found it in some old shop. I lied. I saw no point in telling him about the underground library yet. I felt awkward. Later, after he left, I opened the book alone in my bedroom. I held a flashlight near it, trying to recreate the conditions. Nothing happened. I stayed up late, flipping pages, waiting. I got nothing. The next evening, I returned. I brought a small flashlight, a pen, and a notepad. I wanted to record details. When I entered the library, I flipped my flashlight on and aimed it at the shelves. The books looked dull and worn. I took one and opened it. At first, blank pages. Then slow, small marks of ink spread. I saw words appear. This time I read carefully. It described me standing in front of a mirror and talking to myself. It said I argued with my own reflection and insisted that the world outside was fake. I never did that. My throat felt dry. I rubbed my hands on my thighs to calm myself. I jotted down some phrases in my notepad, but after I wrote them down, I looked back at the page. The text had changed. Now it said I spoke in a language I never learned. I cursed at people I never met. It was twisted, confusing. I tried a different approach. I held the pen near the page, but it just rolled off. The surface was slippery. I couldn't mark it. I tried taking a photo with my phone. The picture showed only blank pages. No matter what angle I tried, it showed nothing. I closed the book, feeling my breathing get faster. My palms were sweaty. My heart beat harder. I checked other shelves. I found books of all sizes. I found stacks on the floor. I flipped through several. They all showed impossible versions of my life. One described me climbing a tower in a city I never visited. Another described me working a job I never had. There were references to clothes I never wore, foods I never tasted, people I never knew. In all of them, my name and my face appeared in different scenes. I kept shaking my head, wiping sweat from my forehead. I felt lightheaded, but forced myself to stand still and read more. The silence in that place was absolute. I could only hear my breathing and the slight rustle of pages. I lost track of time. My legs got stiff. My stomach growled. My body felt exhausted. I realized I had been standing in that underground room for too long. I stepped back, placed the books where I found them, and tried to leave. But I took a wrong turn. I ended up near a shelf with thicker volumes. They were larger, heavier. I picked one and opened it. The ink formed slowly. It showed me opening the same book. It was describing what I was doing in that exact moment. I saw the words describe my hand holding the cover, my eyes reading the lines, my breathing pattern. It said I looked worried. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I flipped the page and it showed a scene with me kneeling on the ground, covering my ears, as if I heard something unbearable. I didn't hear anything, but now I felt tension in my ears. I felt a ringing. I tried to shake it off, but the page showed it happening anyway. I closed that book and put it back. I walked quickly, turning corners until I found the door. I left as fast as I could, climbed the steps, and got out through the grate. Outside, I just stood there for a minute, hands on my knees, breathing the fresh air. I felt unsteady. I went home, took a shower, and tried to relax. I felt certain that I shouldn't go back, but the place pulled at me. The next night, I didn't go. I stayed home and tried to watch TV. My mind kept replaying those words and images. I told myself it wasn't real, but I remembered the smell and the strange feeling of the pages under my fingers. I lasted 3 days before I returned. I don't know why I went back. I felt stupid doing it. I put on a jacket, gloves, and brought a small camera. I thought maybe a video would show something. Once inside, I recorded the shelves and the candles. I spoke out loud, describing what I saw. I took a book and opened it. The words appeared again. They described me standing there filming. They said I was trembling. I looked at my hand and noticed it shaking. I tried to hold still, but I couldn't. My arm felt weak. I aimed the camera at the pages. On the camera screen, the pages were blank. I could see the writing with my eyes, but not on the screen. I cursed under my breath and stopped recording. I put the camera away. I checked another book. This time it described something more unsettling. It said I lived in a hidden room under my own bed. It said I spent nights crawling through a secret door and scribbling nonsense on the walls. I don't have a hidden room. I never wrote anything on my walls. But as I read it, I felt a tightness in my chest. I could almost picture it. I touched my chest, feeling my heart pounding. I swallowed hard, feeling saliva stick in my throat. The silence in that place made every sound echo in my head. My breathing, my faint steps, the whisper of turning pages. I wiped my forehead again. I kept feeling sweat beads forming. I tried to reason it out. Maybe the ink reacted to something in the air. Maybe I was hallucinating. I pressed my nails into my palm until it hurt, just to feel something real. I tried leaving again, but my mind was stuck on one thought. What if I found a book that showed me something useful, something that explained what this place was? I scanned the shelves for a volume that looked different. They all looked the same except one near the corner. Its cover was rough, like sandpaper, and darker than the others. I pulled it out. The pages were slow to reveal anything. I waited, breathing faster. My chest felt heavy. My shoulders were tense. Finally, the ink started to form. The text described me standing on a street, shouting at strangers. It said I wore clothes I'd never owned. It said I carried a knife. I don't own a knife. I felt my mouth go dry. I closed the book and slipped it back. I heard a faint scraping sound. I froze. I looked around, holding my breath. It sounded like something heavy sliding on the floor. I took a slow step toward the source. There was nothing there. Just more shelves, candles, and books. I listened again. Silence. I turned and hurried back to the entrance. I didn't want to be there anymore. I got home and checked my camera footage. It showed me in a dim room with candles, talking to myself and flipping blank pages. No matter how many times I watched it, I saw no words on the pages. It looked like I was losing my mind. I swore at the screen, feeling a knot in my stomach. I paced my living room, touching my face and hair, pulling at my sleeves. I could remember every detail. But the camera showed nothing, just me flipping blank paper. The next few nights I felt restless. I didn't return. I slept badly. I got up several times at night to check my bedroom. I opened my closet, looked under my bed, checked every corner. I felt no reason to do that, but I did it anyway. I touched the walls, making sure there were no hidden doors. After almost a week, I felt drawn back again. I wanted to see if something had changed. I went down the steps, past the old wooden door, and entered the chamber. The candles were still burning, the same smell, the same silence. I pulled a book. The words formed quickly. They showed me sitting in a chair, staring at empty pages for hours as if waiting for them to speak. They described me shaking my head and muttering nonsense. They said I refused to leave. My stomach turned. I shut the book. I told myself I would leave immediately, but I didn't. I picked another book. It showed me sleeping on the floor of the library, curled up under a shelf. I never did that. I never slept there. But now I couldn't ignore the tension in my legs, the stiffness in my shoulders. I wiped my face again, feeling the dampness of sweat. I took several steps back, looking at all the shelves, all those nameless books. Each one carried a twisted version of me. I felt my heart beating faster. I gripped my hands into fists, trying to steady myself. I told myself I would leave for good. I turned and walked fast. I found the door, climbed the steps, and emerged into the alley. I replaced the grate. It was dark outside. A street lamp hissed quietly. I stood there, breathing heavily, shaking my head. My clothes stuck to my back. I haven't gone back since. I keep thinking about it, though. The memory of those pages forming words and images of me doing impossible things won't leave my head. I see my face on those pages every time I close my eyes. I feel my heart race when I think about those shelves and that strange ink. Even now, telling this, I feel sweat on my neck and my hands are shaking. I can't shake the feeling that if I return, the books will show me something worse. Something that will make me question everything I see outside those walls. I don't want to find out. I don't want to see what's next. But I can't promise I won't go back. I can't promise I won't try one more time. I feel stupid just saying that, but it's true. The memory of that underground library sticks to me like a strange odor I can't wash away. And now I feel stuck with it, whether I like it or not. It was around 11 at night when I left the small office building where I work. I was alone, tired, and just wanted to get home. I had worked late because the project was behind schedule. I didn't bother calling anyone. I had no interest in talking. I just wanted to walk back to my apartment. The route was short and usually quiet. I preferred to pass through a narrow alley made of old cobblestones because it was the fastest way to get home. It was well lit enough, but not crowded. It saved me several minutes compared to the main streets. That night I took the same path without thinking twice. As I stepped into the alley, I noticed that it was empty. The streetlights were dim. The windows above were dark. I heard my footsteps on the uneven stones. It sounded normal at first. Each step produced a clear, sharp sound. But after a few seconds, I noticed something odd. My footsteps were echoing in a strange way. Normally, there would be a quick, hollow echo against the old walls, but now it seemed delayed. I would step and then, a moment later, I would hear the sound repeat, but slightly distorted. It was as if something was behind me, replaying my steps just after I made them. I stopped to listen. I stood there, shoulders tense, breathing through my nose. I turned around. The alley behind me was empty. The only things I saw were a few old trash cans, some damp stains on the ground, and a couple of locked delivery doors. I waited and listened. Nothing moved. I heard no voices, no cars, no wind. I decided to keep walking. Maybe I was tired and imagining things. I started walking again and focused on my steps. Step, step, step. My shoes on the stones sounded normal. Then I heard the delayed echo again. This time I concentrated on it. My step would land, and 1 second later I heard the same step behind me. I looked over my shoulder as I walked, but I saw nothing. My heart began to beat faster. My mouth felt dry. I tried to dismiss it. The alley sometimes made weird echoes. The buildings were old and had strange angles. I tried to walk faster, hoping I could just get out of that place and stop worrying. As I picked up the pace, the echo also seemed to pick up. But I noticed something else. It wasn't just a delayed version of my step anymore. There was another sound. It sounded heavier, as if someone large or injured was dragging their foot along the stones. The rhythm didn't match my steps. I would take one step. The echo would come a moment later. Then after my next step, I would hear a heavier, scraping step that didn't belong to me. It sounded slow, heavy, and deliberate. I stopped again. I turned around quickly and stared into the empty alley. I tightened my fists. My eyes moved over every detail. A broken piece of cardboard on the ground, a small puddle of water near a drain, a narrow metal gate that was locked with a chain. I saw no movement. I listened. For a few seconds, I heard only my own breathing. Then I heard something else. A soft, irregular breathing sound came from somewhere behind me. It was low, like someone trying to breathe through a congested nose. I waited, holding my breath. The breathing slowed, then stopped. I saw nothing. My chest felt tight. I turned and started walking again, faster this time. My head felt hot. My forehead was sweating. I wanted to get out of there. I could feel that I was close to the end of the alley, The main streetlights were visible ahead. I focused on that. I ignored the strange echo and the heavy steps. I just wanted to reach the main road and walk home like I always did. As I reached the end of the alley, I slowed down and glanced back one last time. Still nothing. The air was silent. No one was there. I got home a few minutes later. I live alone in a small apartment on the second floor of a modest building. I have a bedroom, a living room, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. Nothing fancy. I locked the door behind me and tossed my keys on the kitchen counter. I drank a glass of water and tried to relax. I told myself that I was just tired and overworked. I sat on my couch, turned on the TV, and watched something pointless. My shoulders were sore from tension, so I stretched. After an hour or so, I turned off the TV and went to bed. The bedroom was dark and quiet. I closed the window and the blinds. I turned off the lights. The building was mostly silent at that hour. Sometimes I could hear a neighbor closing a door or flushing a toilet, but that night it was quiet. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. My mind drifted back to the alley. I imagined someone lurking in the shadows, following me with heavy steps, breathing heavily. I told myself it was just my imagination. I tried to think about work, about the tasks I had to complete the next day. I tried to think about what I would have for breakfast. I tried to distract myself. Then I heard it. It was the same breathing. It was very faint, but I could hear it clearly. It was inside my bedroom. It sounded like someone standing in the corner, leaning against the wall, breathing slowly. The hairs on my arms rose. My heart started pounding. I lay still, on my back, staring up at the dark ceiling. I could not see anything. I reached over to my bedside table and turned on the small lamp. The light flooded the room. I scanned every corner. Nothing. The room was empty. My closet door was closed. My chair was empty. There was nothing behind the door. I listened carefully. No breathing. Just the soft hum of the lamp. I turned the lamp off and lay back down. After a few minutes, I heard it again. A slow, heavy breathing sound. I sat up and turned on the lamp again. Nothing. Silence. This happened 3 times. Each time I turned on the light, there was nothing there. When I turned it off after a few moments, the breathing returned. It was driving me crazy. I got out of bed, turned on the overhead light, and checked the entire apartment. I opened the closet, looked under my bed, opened the bathroom door, checked the living room, looked behind the couch, checked the kitchen, and even opened some cabinets. Nothing. The apartment was empty. I returned to bed, too tired to deal with it. I left the lamp on and tried to sleep. I never sleep with the light on, but that night I had no choice. I dozed off at some point, maybe around 3 in the morning. I woke up late the next day, feeling groggy. I showered, got dressed, and left for work. I tried to push the memory out of my mind. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe I was just stressed. I forced myself not to think about it. The next day passed slowly. I avoided staying late. I left the office a bit earlier, just after 9. I took the main street instead of the alley. I didn't care if it took longer. I walked along the busy road, passing by a few bars and shops still open. I reached my building and went upstairs. I felt relieved that I didn't have to deal with that alley. In my apartment, I ate some leftovers, watched TV, and tried to relax. Around midnight, I got ready for bed. I turned off the lights and lay in the dark. For a few minutes, everything was fine. Then I heard a soft scrape on the floor, like a foot dragging slowly. I sat up and turned on the light. Nothing. I checked around. Still empty. I turned off the light again. After a moment, the same scrape. It sounded as if something heavy was standing in my room, shifting its weight. It sounded like it was right next to my bed. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I turned the light on again. Silence. This time I decided to keep the light on. I sat there and watched my empty room. After about 15 minutes, I turned it off, thinking maybe whatever I was hearing was in my head. The second the room went dark, I heard the breathing again, slow and steady. It sounded close, maybe a foot or two away, just out of sight. My hands were shaking. I got up, turned on every light in the apartment, and stayed awake for hours. I paced from room to room. I opened my window and leaned out, looking at the street below. Cars passed by. People walked their dogs. Everything seemed normal outside. Inside my place, I felt trapped with something I couldn't see. I grabbed my flashlight from a kitchen drawer and tested it. It worked fine. I decided to try something. I turned off the lights in the living room, leaving only the hallway light on. I stood in the darkness of the living room and waited. After a while, I heard it again. Breathing, scraping, shifting. I turned the flashlight on, shining it around the room. Nothing. Just my coffee table, my TV, my old couch. I heard a slight creak behind me, turned around, saw nothing. My neck felt stiff. My heart was racing. I hardly slept that night. In the morning, I left for work feeling exhausted. My eyes burned. I tried to tell myself that maybe it was some noise from the pipes or from the building settling. But I knew what I heard. I recognized the breathing from the alley. It had followed me, or I had brought it with me. I started to feel anxious about returning home. I thought about staying in a hotel, but I didn't want to spend the money, and I felt embarrassed to admit that I was scared of my own apartment. I stayed late at the office that night, hoping that when I got home I would be too tired to care. It was past midnight when I finally left. I had to pass through that alley again to save time, because I was simply too tired to walk the long way. I stepped into the alley and felt my throat tighten. It was quiet. My footsteps echoed normally at first. I forced myself to walk slowly and listen. After a few seconds, I heard the delayed echo. Then I heard the heavier, dragging steps behind me, out of sync with mine. I stopped. The sound continued for a moment, and then stopped. I turned around and shone my flashlight down the alley. I saw nothing but the worn cobblestones, a closed door, a few scattered pieces of trash. I moved the beam of light along the walls. I saw a wet stain on the ground. I saw a plastic bag caught in a small gap in the wall. But no person, no animal, nothing. I spoke quietly. "Who's there?" My voice sounded shaky. I waited, listening. I only heard my own breathing. It sounded too loud in my ears. I slowly walked forward again. The moment I started moving, the echo picked up, then the heavy steps, then the breathing. It was right behind me, closer than before. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I turned around suddenly, holding the flashlight high. The beam caught something at the very edge of the light. It looked like a shape, a dark outline against the wall. I couldn't see any details. I stepped closer, shining the light directly at the spot. There was nothing there but a wall with cracked paint. I left the alley at a half run, breathing hard, my heart pounding. I reached my building, ran upstairs, and slammed my door. Inside, I turned on every light, opened my closet, searched every corner. Nothing there. I sat on my couch and held my flashlight. I felt sweat trickling down my temples. I waited. After a few minutes, I turned off all the lights except for the bathroom one, leaving a dim glow in the hallway. I listened, breathing. It came again. Slow, heavy, just like in the alley. I tried to keep calm. I stood up and walked toward the sound. I felt ridiculous. I tried to locate the exact spot. It sounded like it was right in front of me, but I saw nothing. I reached out my hand, touched the air, touched the wall, the door frame. Nothing unusual. The breathing continued. I backed away, turned on the light, and it stopped. I realized it only happened in darkness. I decided to test this. I left the living room light on and turned off the bathroom light. No sound. Turned off the living room light, left the bathroom light on. The sound returned, but faint. As if the darker it got, the louder it became. I tried turning off all lights again, total darkness. The breathing got louder, closer, until it sounded like someone was inches from my ear. I turned the flashlight on, and it disappeared instantly. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything touching me. There were no strange smells, no movement of air, just sound. It made no sense. I considered calling someone. I thought about calling a friend or maybe the police, but what would I say? That I heard breathing and footsteps in the dark? They would think I was imagining things. I paced around until morning. I ate a simple breakfast with the lights on. I didn't turn them off again. After sunrise, I couldn't hear anything strange. The sounds seemed limited to nighttime, but I knew they would be back. Every night, as soon as darkness filled my apartment, I would hear that breathing. If I moved in the dark, I would hear those dragging steps following me. If I closed my eyes, I could imagine something right behind me, waiting. I started leaving the lights on in every room. I wasted a lot of electricity, but I preferred that over hearing that thing. Still, the thought of sleeping with the lights blazing was unsettling. After a few days of this, I decided to go back to the alley and stand there until I could see something. I wanted to know what it was. I picked a night after work, left the office late, and returned to that alley. I walked up and down it, shining my flashlight at every corner. Nothing happened. No breathing, no dragging steps. I stood there for a long time. Still nothing. Confused, I walked home. Inside my apartment, I turned off the lights. The breathing returned. It was as if it had chosen my home as its hiding place, as if it had slipped into my mind and settled there. Over time, I learned to live with it. I kept lights on at night. When I had to turn them off, I did it quickly. I tried not to move in the dark. I tried not to listen too hard. I never saw anything. I never felt a hand on me, never got pushed or hurt. It just breathed and moved around, always out of sight, always close. It made my nights tense and uncomfortable, but I learned to handle it by avoiding darkness. Until now, I've never told anyone. I still don't know what followed me home from that alley. I only know that it's still here, waiting in the dark, breathing quietly when I close my eyes. I got home late in the afternoon. I had my suitcase in one hand and a small bag of souvenirs in the other. I was tired and hungry. The hallway looked the same as always. Dull walls, a dim overhead light, the neighbor's door shut tight. But something was different. There was a narrow wooden staircase between my apartment and my neighbor's door. It started right above the floorboards and went up toward a ceiling that had never been there before. It didn't belong. I saw the old paint flakes on its sides, the uneven steps, the weak light from the hallway bulb barely reaching up there. It smelled like old wood and dust. I hesitated, looked up, saw nothing but shadows beyond the fifth step. I tried to find some kind of sign or explanation, but there was nothing. I reached out and touched it. The wood felt cold and dry. I didn't go up. I just stood there, breathing slowly, my heart thumping a bit faster than normal. I forced myself to turn away. I unlocked my door, dragged my suitcase inside, and closed it. I leaned against the door for a moment. I didn't know what to think. I put my stuff down, opened a window, and tried to act normal. I heated some leftovers in the microwave and ate in silence. I tried to watch TV, but I kept glancing toward my front door, wondering if I'd imagined the staircase. After an hour, I decided to check again. I got up, put on my shoes, and opened the door. It was still there. Same narrow stairs, same old wood. I didn't see anyone around. It felt strange to have this thing appear out of nowhere. I considered knocking on my neighbor's door, but I never got along with that guy. He never said hello, always left trash bags in the hall. The thought of speaking to him made my stomach tighten. Instead, I just looked at the staircase again. I stepped closer and stuck my head under it, trying to see where it led. I saw nothing, just a dark space. No sound, no movement. I touched the bottom step with my foot. The wood creaked lightly. I didn't want to climb it. I felt uneasy. I went back inside and locked my door. That night, I tried to sleep. I left the bedroom door open so I could hear the hallway outside my apartment. I didn't usually do that, but I felt a need to stay alert. I turned off the lights, lay in bed, closed my eyes. My mind drifted, but I stayed on edge. Around midnight, I heard it. Soft footsteps. They sounded like someone walking slowly up or down those stairs. The wood creaked, each step careful and slow. I held my breath and sat up. The footsteps went up, then down. I listened for voices but heard none. There was a faint scraping sound, like something rough sliding along the railing or a wall. I got out of bed and went to my front door. I didn't open it right away. I pressed my ear against it and listened. The footsteps continued, sometimes pausing, sometimes speeding up. Then I heard a faint whisper. I couldn't tell what the voice said. It sounded like someone breathing words without form. My legs felt heavy, and I noticed I was sweating. My stomach tightened, and I swallowed hard. I turned the doorknob slowly and opened the door a crack. The hallway light was weak. I saw the staircase. I saw nothing else. I opened the door a bit more and stepped into the hall. The air smelled stale and rotten, like old fabric left in a wet basement. I looked up the stairs. They stretched upward, farther than before. I counted the steps. I counted 10, but I couldn't see a landing, just darkness. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice sounded small and shaky. There was no response. I waited, listening. The footsteps had stopped. My mouth was dry. I stepped closer and put my foot on the first step. The wood felt soft under my weight, and the step made a low creak. I climbed one step, then another. The air got heavier. It smelled like mold and dust, making me want to cough. I lifted my hand, trying to feel if there was a ceiling. Nothing. I climbed 2 more steps. The hallway behind me seemed to shrink. When I looked back, my own front door looked smaller. I kept climbing, squinting into the darkness. I couldn't see where the staircase ended. I reached out and felt only empty space. My forehead had a thin layer of sweat. My pulse pounded in my neck. I tried to go higher, but something felt wrong. The steps seemed to shift under my feet, not sideways but forward, stretching into a gap that didn't end. My chest felt tight. The smell got worse. My stomach turned. I froze and tried to climb down. But when I turned around, the bottom looked farther away than it should have been. I gripped the railing. It felt rough and cold. My heart thumped so hard I could feel it in my ears. I took slow steps back down, one by one, until I reached the hallway floor. I stumbled off the stairs and nearly fell. I rushed inside my apartment and closed the door. I locked it and put a chair against it. My breathing was shallow, my hands shaky. I stayed awake until morning, pacing back and forth, checking the door every few minutes. In the morning, the staircase was still there. I decided I needed answers. I went upstairs to the building manager's office. I asked him if he had sent anyone to do maintenance work or if there was some kind of strange construction going on. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said there was nothing like that in the building. I asked him to come see it. He followed me downstairs. When we got to my floor, the staircase was there, clear as day. The manager stared at it. He ran his hand along the wood, frowned, and said he would call someone. He left, and I never saw him come back that day. I went back inside my apartment. I tried to ignore the staircase, but I couldn't. At noon, I heard faint thumping on the other side of my wall. It sounded like someone dragging something heavy. I pressed my ear to the wall. I heard soft scraping, irregular steps, and something like chains rattling. I don't know why I thought of chains, but the sound reminded me of metal links sliding on wood. I felt my stomach clench. My jaw tightened. I told myself not to panic. I turned on the TV, tried to eat something simple, a sandwich or some crackers, but I had no appetite. My mouth was dry, and I drank water every few minutes. Later that afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights on. I heard slow footsteps again, this time coming directly from above. I realized something. The footsteps seemed to follow my routine. When I got up to get a drink of water, after a few seconds, I heard footsteps above, as if someone else was doing the same thing. When I went to the bathroom, I heard them shuffling above, pausing where I thought the bathroom would be. It was as if someone was trying to copy my actions, but doing it on another level, in some empty space connected by the stairs. I tried to talk to the neighbor again. I knocked on his door. No answer. I knocked harder. Still no response. I put my ear to his door. No sound. I went back to my apartment. I turned on all the lights. The presence above didn't go away. I heard footsteps off and on, a chair scraping against a floor that shouldn't be there, water dripping or something like it. When night came, I refused to turn off the lights. I sat in my living room, staring at the front door. Around midnight, I heard the steps on the staircase. They moved slowly up and down, pausing at intervals. I heard quiet whispering again, too low to make out words. My heart rate went up, and my breathing got shallow. I felt a tightness in my chest and a tingling in my hands. I considered going out there again, but my legs felt weak. My fingertips were cold. I tried to distract myself by checking my phone, but I had no messages. The building manager never returned my calls. My neighbor didn't come home. I felt alone. Eventually, I worked up the courage to open the door again. I took a flashlight this time. I stepped into the hallway. The staircase was still there, going up into darkness. I shined the flashlight upward. The light was weak and the darkness swallowed it after a few steps. I climbed onto the first step, then the second. The wood creaked, and I heard a soft movement above, like someone shifting their weight. I shined the light upward. I saw something move out of sight. My lungs tightened, and I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I forced myself up one more step. The smell was worse now, like old damp clothes and rotten wood. My eyes watered. I tried to call out, but my voice sounded strained. "Who's there?" I said. No answer. Just soft scraping sounds. I reached out with the flashlight, trying to catch a glimpse of anything. I saw a shape, maybe a leg or part of a torso, but it melted away into darkness before I could be sure. It made a faint clicking sound like nails tapping on wood. My knees shook. I couldn't stand it. I backed down the steps and hurried back into my apartment. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I pressed my forehead against the door, breathing fast. I noticed my shirt was damp with sweat. The next morning I felt tired and sore. My back hurt from sleeping badly. I ate a piece of bread and some fruit, forcing it down. I tried to think straight. I needed a plan. I decided to try something direct. I found a hammer in my closet. I went into the hallway and stood in front of the staircase. I hit the bottom step with the hammer. The wood chipped a little, but the staircase didn't break. I hit it again, harder. The sound echoed down the hallway. I felt a dull vibration in my arms. The staircase didn't collapse or even loosen. It felt solid, rooted in something that I couldn't see. I decided to block it. I dragged a small cabinet from my apartment into the hallway and pushed it against the bottom step. It covered the first step, making it harder to access. I went back inside, closed the door, and waited. That night I heard noises again, but this time there were scraping sounds on the cabinet. I heard the wood of my cabinet shifting. I opened the door a crack and saw that the cabinet had moved a few inches. There were fresh scratches on it. My throat felt tight and I backed away, slamming the door. I paced around my apartment, rubbing my hands together. I noticed I was breathing through my mouth. The silence between the noises was even worse than the noises themselves. I felt like I was being watched, even though I couldn't prove it. The footsteps above started again. They followed me as I moved. When I turned on the faucet, I heard dripping above. When I sat down at my table, I heard the scrape of a chair above. When I coughed, I heard a soft echo from above. My head hurt. I felt nauseous. My eyes were dry and I kept blinking. I tried calling a friend, but my phone call didn't go through. The signal was fine, but for some reason the call failed. I tried another friend. Same problem. I sent messages, but nobody replied. I felt isolated. I tried knocking on other neighbors' doors, but no one answered. The hallway was silent except for the staircase. I could hear the slight creaking of wood whenever I walked past it. I noticed the hallway light was getting dimmer, or maybe it was just my imagination. That night, I considered sleeping in the hallway, just to see what would happen. But the smell kept me away. That moldy, stale smell was even stronger now. It clung to my clothes and hair if I stood near the stairs too long. I kept my apartment door shut tight. I slept on the couch, facing the door. I woke up several times, sweating, hearing soft scraping on the other side of the door. By the next day, I felt exhausted. My eyes were bloodshot. My stomach felt twisted. I ate a dry cracker and drank water. I decided to try something else. I went into the hallway with a roll of tape and a piece of chalk. I climbed a couple of steps up the staircase and marked a line with the chalk, then put a strip of tape across the step, hoping to see if it changed position when I wasn't looking. Then I went back inside and watched through the peephole for a while. Nothing happened. After a few hours, I checked. The chalk line was gone, and the tape was shredded. I stared at it, heart pounding. I felt sweat trickle down my back. I heard a faint sound from above, like someone clearing their throat. I hurried back inside and locked the door again. I stood in my living room, rubbing my eyes. I didn't know what else to do. I tried to just ignore it, to spend the day inside without checking. But the noises never stopped completely. Every time I tried to relax, I'd hear a creak or a scrape, something to remind me that it was still there. The staircase never disappeared. It stayed in the hallway, always waiting. At night, the footsteps continued. The whispers came and went. The smell never left. The presence above continued to follow my routine, copying my sounds, my movements. I never saw it clearly. I never saw a face or a body. I only felt something there, watching, waiting. In the end, I stopped trying to remove it. I stopped trying to climb it. I kept my door locked, and I tried not to leave my apartment after dark. I didn't invite anyone over. I stopped calling the manager. I lowered my voice when I moved around at night, trying not to give it anything to copy. But no matter what I did, it remained. The narrow staircase leading nowhere, always dark, always smelling like mold. The footsteps and whispers never ceased. They just kept going, step by step, breath by breath, as if the space above were slowly filling with something I could never understand. I remember the first time I noticed it. It was late, probably around midnight. I had been in my new house for a few days. I had unpacked the essentials, a mattress on the bedroom floor, a small table and chair in the kitchen, and an old wooden rocking chair in the backyard. I bought that chair at a garage sale and placed it on the patch of grass behind the house. I planned to spend my evenings out there, relaxing and clearing my head. But that night I looked through the back window and saw the chair moving. It was rocking slowly, forward and backward, but there was no breeze. The air was still. My first thought was that I had pushed it by accident earlier, leaving it to sway. But I had been careful when I set it down. I tried to ignore it and went to bed. I told myself it was nothing. The next night, it happened again. I stood at the kitchen sink, looking outside. The chair rocked. It made a soft creaking noise as it moved. I stepped out onto the back porch, keeping the light off because I didn't want to attract any bugs. The chair kept moving. I felt my neck tense up. I swallowed hard. I stood there for maybe a full minute, watching this wooden chair shift forward and backward on its own. There was still no wind. The trees were still. Even the distant street noises were quiet. When I finally worked up the nerve, I walked down the small steps into the yard. I approached the chair slowly. When I got closer, it stopped. I stared at it. I bent down and touched the ground under the chair legs. It was flat, solid. The grass was short and dry. There was no reason for it to move on its own. I touched the chair. It felt normal. Old wood, small chips, and worn edges. I gripped one armrest and tried to rock it. It moved as expected. Nothing odd. I let go and stepped back. It remained still. I returned to the porch, watched it a little longer, and it stayed still. I went inside, closed the door, and locked it. The following evening, I had almost forgotten about it. I had a busy day moving boxes around and setting up the bedroom furniture properly. Around 11, I remembered the chair. I pulled aside the curtain on the back door and looked. The chair was turning. It was rotating slightly, making a scraping sound against the ground. The front of the chair ended up facing the door. My door. I stood there with my mouth open. The motion was steady, controlled. It was not random. It stopped as soon as it faced me. I dropped the curtain and stepped back. I felt my arms get goosebumps. The hair on my neck stood up. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I didn't sleep well that night. I woke up a few times, looked around my dark bedroom, and wondered if I should go check the backyard again. Each time I stayed under the covers, staring at the ceiling. By morning, I felt tired and jumpy. I kept replaying that slow turn in my mind. The chair had looked right at me, or at least it seemed that way. The front of the chair ended up pointing directly at the door. It was like it wanted me to notice. I tried to ignore these thoughts. I told myself it was just some trick of the ground. Maybe the legs weren't even. Maybe there was some subtle push from the wind that I couldn't feel. I made coffee, ate something, and got on with my day. I spent hours putting things in shelves and hanging clothes in my closet. By the time evening came, I didn't feel like going outside. I knew I had to look, though. I wanted to prove to myself that it was nothing strange. That night, I waited until it got completely dark. I turned off all the lights in the house except for a small one in the hallway. I crept to the back door and looked outside again. The chair was moving in a slow circle as if trying to show me all angles of the yard. Its legs dragged a bit in the grass. The noise was light, but noticeable. It circled twice, then pointed toward one of the back windows of the house. It stopped there. I held my breath. I thought about going outside, but my stomach was tight. My hands felt cold. I decided to wait and watch. After a minute or two, the chair rocked forward and backward again, very slowly. I felt a thick lump in my throat. I knew this was not normal. I had no explanation for it. I looked at the window the chair was facing. It was one of the bedroom windows. Nothing unusual there. I tried to think if there was a logical cause. Maybe a neighbor playing a prank, maybe some strange magnetic field. Maybe I was imagining it. But I knew I wasn't imagining. I could see it right there, plain as day. I quietly opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool and dry. I could smell the grass. I could hear a distant car passing on a nearby street. The chair stayed still. I walked down the steps and stopped. The chair began to rock again. When I thought about getting closer, it rocked faster. When I hesitated, it slowed down. I walked a few steps forward and it picked up speed. My mouth felt dry. I backed away and it slowed again, almost to a stop. I felt like it was reacting to me, understanding my level of tension. I tried thinking about something else. I tried to calm down. The chair slowed to a gentle sway. I turned around and went back inside. I locked the door and leaned my forehead against it. I took a deep breath and felt my heart pounding. I felt sweat under my arms. My stomach felt tight and unsettled. I decided to test something. I stood in the kitchen, out of sight of the chair, and thought about it. I tried feeling angry at it. I tried feeling annoyed, like I wanted to break it. After a few seconds, I peeked out the window. The chair was spinning slowly, this time pointing at a different door on the side of the house. It was as if it knew my anger and responded by showing me another way out, or at least pointing to a door, maybe provoking me. This pattern continued over the next few nights. When I felt nervous, the chair rocked gently. When I felt scared, it slowed down as if waiting. When I felt frustrated or angry, it would spin around, showing me different windows and doors. I tried not thinking about it. That only made me feel more anxious. The chair reacted to my tension with more movement. If I tried to calm down, it rocked more slowly, almost soothing, but not comforting. More like it was acknowledging my mood. I tried ignoring the backyard altogether. I stayed in the living room, watched TV, and avoided looking outside. But late at night, I could hear the chair move. I would hear the scraping of wood against grass. I would hear the subtle creak of the old joints. The sound was soft but distinct. It made my scalp prickle. I would turn up the TV volume, but I could still sense it. Eventually, I had to look. I would check the door, and sure enough, it would be pointing at some window, rocking slowly. I could not escape the feeling that it was aware of me. After a week of this, I decided to confront it. I took a small flashlight and a hammer outside. It was around midnight. I closed the door behind me and stood on the porch. The chair remained still. I called out. I just said, "What do you want?" My voice sounded shaky and small in the darkness. The chair began a slow rocking. I tried calming down. I tried steadying my breathing. It rocked slower. I felt sweat on my face. I walked down into the yard. I stood about 5 feet from the chair. It rocked at a steady pace forward and backward. I gripped the hammer in my hand. My knuckles felt stiff. I thought about smashing the chair. When I did, it started spinning again, this time circling to face the door that led to the garage. I didn't know what that meant. I tried feeling confused rather than angry. The chair slowed down. I could hear my breathing, shallow and uneven. I took a step closer. The chair rocked faster. I stopped and waited. It slowed again. I reached out with my free hand and touched the armrest. The wood felt dry, rough, and old. The chair stopped moving entirely. I let go and backed up. It started rocking once more. I tried speaking again. I said, "I don't understand." The chair turned slightly and pointed toward the window of my bedroom again. I didn't understand that signal. I had checked that window many times. There was nothing there. I realized I was shaking. My legs felt weak. My stomach had a knot in it. I turned around and went back inside. I locked all the doors and windows. I double-checked them. I sat in the living room and tried not to think. I could still hear a faint scraping outside. I felt trapped because I couldn't understand what the chair wanted or why it was doing this. Over the next few days, I tried different tactics. I moved the chair to another spot in the yard. I placed it under a small tree, away from the original patch of grass. That night, it moved back. I found it in its old spot in the morning. I tried tying it to a heavy stone garden ornament. The rope was old, but I knotted it firmly. During the night, I heard the rope creak. In the morning, the rope was loose on the ground and the chair sat free again. I tried ignoring it for a whole day. I left the house early and returned late. When I came back, I looked outside. The chair was facing the back door. It rocked gently as if waiting. I stood there for a while. I felt a pounding in my chest and a dryness in my mouth. I tried thinking of nothing. The chair slowed. I tried thinking of running away, leaving the house, and never coming back. The chair started spinning faster, scraping the ground more audibly. I wondered if it could hear every thought. I tried picturing a blank wall. The chair slowed to a stop. This went on night after night. I could not find a pattern. Sometimes it focused on windows. Other times it would face a door. Sometimes it would just rock without pointing anywhere. It seemed to respond to my thoughts and emotions more than my actions. When I touched it, it would stop. When I stayed inside, it would move a bit on its own. If I turned my back, I could hear it scraping. If I looked directly at it, it would either stop or slow down. It was always reacting to my internal state, never doing the same thing twice in a predictable way. One evening, I tried something different. I sat in the backyard with the chair, about 10 feet away, and just watched. I brought out a bottle of water and a flashlight. I kept the flashlight off. The moonlight was enough to see the chair's outline. When I felt nervous, it rocked faster. When I managed to calm my breathing and relax my shoulders, it slowed. I tried thinking about random things, the paint in the living room, the driveway that needed sealing. Every time my mind drifted toward fear or confusion, the chair responded. Every time I stayed neutral, it barely moved. I spent an hour doing this. I tested different thoughts. Thinking about work stress made it spin slightly. Thinking about the mailbox made it rock. Thinking about my locked doors made it scrape the ground a bit. It was as if it knew what I cared about and was trying to guide me towards something, but I never found out what. As the days turned into more than a week, I became exhausted. I struggled to sleep because I always listened for that scraping sound. Sometimes I would find the chair turned toward a new angle in the morning, as if it had been looking into a corner of the yard I hadn't considered. I tried rearranging the backyard, moving a small table or a few decorative rocks, but nothing helped. At one point, I tried getting rid of the chair. I lifted it and carried it to the garage. I closed the garage door and locked it. I went back inside and waited by the window. I waited for a sign that it was moving inside the garage. After a few hours, I heard a faint knock on the garage door. I checked, and the chair was right where I left it. I went back inside, tried to relax, and heard a scraping sound from the garage. I ran back out there, opened the garage door, and the chair was facing the door leading to the backyard. I had locked that door. It must have turned on its own without a sound. I put the chair back outside. I did not know what else to do. I eventually realized I could not outsmart it. I could not predict how it would respond. I could not remove it from the property. No matter what I did, it was there. It was always reacting to me, always waiting to see what I would do next. If I stayed calm, it remained gentle, just rocking a bit. If I got upset, it would spin and scrape, pointing at windows and doors as if trying to make me run around checking everything. In the end, I stopped trying to understand. I avoided looking at it. I tried going about my life as if it were not there. But at night, I could sense it. I could feel its presence through the walls. Sometimes I would wake up sweating and know that it was moving outside, responding to my fear. Sometimes I would enter the kitchen in the morning and find it facing a different window, waiting for me to notice. I never solved the mystery. I never understood what it wanted or if it wanted anything at all. It just kept reacting night after night. I still live here. I still try to ignore it. But I know it's out there. I know it's listening. I know that whenever I let my guard down, it will be moving again, scraping and rocking, always there, always watching. I moved into this rented house a few weeks ago. I chose it because it was cheap, had plenty of space, and seemed quiet. The owner told me nothing special about it. She just gave me the keys and left. I spent the first few days arranging my stuff, cleaning and exploring. On the third day, I decided to go up to the attic just to see what was there. I climbed the narrow wooden steps and pushed open the hatch. The attic smelled like stale air and dust. It was dark and cramped, with only a single light bulb on a thin wire above my head. I saw a few boxes stacked against one wall, some old chairs, a rolled-up rug, and a wooden chest with a broken lock. I thought I might find something useful or interesting. I flipped through old newspapers, found a couple of rusted tools, and looked inside the chest. Empty. Then I turned around and saw something hanging on a rusty nail near the far corner. A porcelain mask. It was white with thin eye slits and no color on the cheeks or lips. It looked smooth, but there were a few faded hairline cracks. I noticed it because it was the only thing hanging on the wall. It made no sense to me. I reached out and touched it. It felt cold and hard. I pulled it off the nail and turned it over. Nothing inside, just a hollow shape. The porcelain felt cheap, but it wasn't broken. I shrugged and put it back on the nail. I thought maybe I would ask the owner later. I turned off the light and climbed back down. That night I sat in the living room watching some TV on my laptop and eating a sandwich. The house was quiet. The windows were closed, and there was only the sound of my own chewing and the soft hum of the laptop fan. Around midnight I got tired and decided to head upstairs. Before sleeping, I wanted to take a quick look at the attic again, just to see if I missed anything. I climbed up and pulled the cord for the light. The mask was there, but it looked different. Before, it was straight on the wall. Now it was tilted as if someone had knocked it slightly. It seemed angled in my direction. I stared at it for a few seconds. I wondered if maybe I left it that way. I had no clear memory of the exact angle. I checked the nail. It looked secure. I touched the mask again. It felt the same. I told myself I must have bumped it without realizing. I turned off the light and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling a bit uneasy. I had a dream that the mask was floating outside my bedroom door, but I didn't remember the details. I got dressed, made coffee, and tried to focus on something else. I spent the day applying for jobs online and organizing my things. Around noon, I decided to go get lunch from a nearby deli. As I returned with the paper bag in hand, I noticed the attic hatch was slightly open. I felt a jolt in my stomach. I was sure I closed it before. I climbed up again, feeling a slight nervous pressure behind my eyes. When I turned on the attic light, I looked at the mask. This time, its features seemed more pronounced. The eye slits looked wider, or maybe just a bit more detailed. The curve of the cheeks seemed different. The mouth, which before had been just a small curve, looked like it was slightly parted. I didn't understand how this could happen. I stepped closer. The porcelain surface looked unchanged, but my memory told me something was off. I lifted it off the nail and held it in front of me. Same weight, same texture. I felt a slight chill. I hung it back and left the attic. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the mask. Sometimes I would check it multiple times a day. Each time it showed a new expression. The third time I checked, it looked almost startled. The eyes seemed stretched, and the mouth had a tight line as if surprised. Another time it looked angry, with a slight downturn on what passed for its mouth and narrowed eye openings. Then it looked smug, with a raised sort of contour around the cheeks. I could not understand how a porcelain mask could change. I began to doubt my own memory. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was stressed. But my gut told me this was happening. I tried to ignore it. I left the attic door closed. I avoided going upstairs, but at night I heard faint sounds like creaking wood. I heard soft tapping noises. Once I turned on the kitchen light in the middle of the night, and I thought I saw a white shape at the top of the stairs, but when I blinked it was gone. My heart pounded and I stood there in my shorts holding a glass of water, breathing fast. I told myself I was tired. Eventually I decided I should just get rid of the mask. I grabbed a cardboard box from the garage and went upstairs. The mask showed a wide grin that day. Its mouth seemed stretched too far, and the edges around the eyes looked uneven, like it was smiling in a mocking way. I felt my throat tighten. I pulled it off the nail and dropped it in the box. I closed the box and carried it downstairs. I went out to the backyard and opened the trash bin. I slipped the box inside and closed the lid. I stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, expecting something to happen. Nothing did. I went back inside. For the rest of the day, I tried to relax. I turned on the TV, scrolled through my phone, tried to read something online. By evening, I started to feel a bit better. I cooked a simple dinner and tried to sleep early. When I woke up the next day, I went to the kitchen, hoping to feel normal. The house was quiet. I checked the door to the backyard and saw that it was still locked. I decided to take a quick look at the attic, just to confirm that the mask was gone for good. I climbed up and turned on the light. The nail in the wall was empty. I exhaled, relieved. I went back down. Before going to the bathroom, I stopped dead in my tracks. Hanging on the wall next to the staircase was the mask. It was at eye level, the same mask I threw out. It now had a twisted grin. Its eyes seemed to follow me. I froze in place, feeling my legs tremble. My heart hammered in my chest, and my breathing became shallow. My palms felt damp. I touched it with a shaking hand. It felt solid. I tugged it off the wall and held it close to my face. It looked the same as before. I muttered curses under my breath. I felt panic, but also confusion. I opened the front door and walked straight to the street. I dropped the mask into the large garbage bin on the curb. Then I returned inside, locked the door, and stood in the entryway listening. The house was silent. Later that afternoon, I found the mask again. It was in the bathroom, hanging on the back of the door. This time it looked kind of sneering, as if amused by my attempts to remove it. I yelled at it. I punched the door next to it. I felt a surge of anger because I didn't know what else to do. I grabbed it again, threw it into a plastic bag, tied it tight, and stuffed it into a closet. When I opened the closet a few minutes later, it was gone. I turned around and it was back on the wall in the hallway, tilting its head slightly. I felt dizzy. I grabbed my hair with both hands and tried to calm down, but my heart was racing. I couldn't think straight. I tried calling the owner, but no one answered. I checked the windows. They were locked. The doors were locked. I thought maybe someone was playing a trick on me. I searched the house for any signs of intruders. Nothing. The place was empty except for me and that thing. Over the next few days, the mask began showing expressions that did not match my mood at all. When I felt tired, it looked excited. When I felt upset, it looked calm. When I felt hungry, it looked full and satisfied. It was always the opposite of what I felt. It was like it was trying to display emotions on my behalf, as if it wanted to replace how I felt with its own version. I started to feel disconnected from myself. I would walk past a mirror and see my face. Then I would see the mask on some wall showing a different expression. It made me feel uneasy. I noticed I was touching my own face more often. I would rub my cheeks, press my eyebrows, pinch my lips. I was checking if my face was still my own. One night I got desperate. I tried to smash the mask. I waited until I found it hanging on a door in the bedroom. I took it down and threw it on the wooden floor, trying to break it. It hit the floor but did not shatter. I stomped on it, but it wouldn't crack. It felt harder than before. I picked it up and tried to bend it, but it was rigid. I felt stupid and helpless. I dropped it and stepped back. As I turned around, I heard a click. The attic door, which was at the end of the hallway, slammed shut. I ran to it and tried to pull it open, but it was locked from the inside, which made no sense. I banged on it. I shouted. Nothing happened. I went downstairs and tried to ignore it. The mask was now hanging in the kitchen, watching me. I had this constant feeling that it was trying to get inside me somehow. I felt this strange tightness in my chest. I felt like I couldn't relax. I was always tense, looking over my shoulder. The mask kept moving around. Sometimes I would see it on a shelf, or on a hook in a closet, or even inside the refrigerator door when I opened it. Always staring. Always showing some emotion I wasn't feeling. If I felt sleepy, it looked alert. If I felt nervous, it looked confident. If I got angry, it looked pleased. I tried leaving the house once. I packed a bag and walked out the front door. But when I stepped onto the porch, I realized I forgot my car keys. When I turned back inside to get them, I saw the mask hanging right next to them, almost as if blocking my way. I grabbed the keys anyway, but when I tried to start my car, the engine wouldn't turn over. I checked under the hood and nothing seemed wrong, but it refused to start. After several attempts, I got out and slammed the door. I looked back at the house. I needed a plan. I decided I would just keep throwing the mask out until it stopped appearing. I kept taking it outside and tossing it in the bin, but it always came back. I tried burying it in the backyard. I dug a hole behind a bush, dropped it in, and covered it up. I went inside, and an hour later it was hanging on the bathroom mirror. I felt sweat on my forehead. My stomach churned. I wanted to vomit, but I kept it down. I slept on the couch that night. I kept all the lights on. The mask hung from the lamp cord, swaying slightly whenever I moved in the room. I tried to ignore it. I watched it closely, but I never saw it move on its own. It was always still until I looked away. Then it would change position or expression the next time I spotted it. My heart pounded almost constantly now. My jaw felt tight. My back muscles ached from tension. In the morning, I decided to talk to it. I know it sounds stupid, but I had to do something. I stood in front of it while it hung from a coat hook in the hallway. I said, "What do you want from me?" No response. I asked again, louder. Nothing. I touched it, shook it, tried to pry something off it, but it remained silent and solid. I started to think it wanted me to break down. Maybe it wanted me to panic so hard that I couldn't think straight. I tried to stay calm. I tried to focus on the facts. The mask changed expressions. The mask moved around the house without explanation. It reflected emotions I didn't feel. It wouldn't let me remove it permanently. It made me feel as if it was taking over my feelings. I was breathing heavily, my hands trembling as I tried to piece together a plan. Without metaphors or fancy words, all I can say is that I felt trapped. The attic door was still locked. I tried forcing it open with a crowbar, but the wood didn't even splinter. The door was solid and wouldn't budge. I tried removing a window pane to escape, but the windows wouldn't open fully. They stuck as if painted shut. I tried calling a locksmith, but my phone kept losing signal. Everything became difficult. The house was quiet, but it felt like the silence was pressing on my ears. The mask started appearing closer to me. Sometimes I would wake up and find it inches from my face, just hanging from a string I didn't remember being there. I would jump back, my heart pounding. I pushed it away. I cursed at it. I tried ignoring it, but it was impossible. Every time I turned around, it was somewhere in sight, mocking me. I noticed a strange pattern. Each time I felt a certain emotion, the mask would show the opposite. When I felt confusion, it looked certain. When I felt sad, it looked overjoyed. When I felt scared, it looked relaxed and amused. It was as if it was trying to replace each of my normal reactions with its own. I realized that my own feelings were starting to feel dull. I tried to get angry at it, but my anger felt weaker. I tried to get excited about leaving the house one day, but I couldn't feel real excitement. It was as if the mask was absorbing my emotions piece by piece. After days of this, my body felt heavy and tired. I had trouble focusing my eyes. I would stand in the kitchen, staring at the wall. The mask would be somewhere behind me. I could feel it. I felt like I was losing track of myself. Sometimes I touched my face and felt nothing but numbness. I tried to eat, but I had no appetite. I tried to sleep, but I felt wired, tense, and restless. The mask was always there when I opened my eyes. I paced the house, checking each room, looking for a way out, trying different tools on the attic door, but nothing worked. I tried to remove the hinges, but they wouldn't budge. I tried to break a window with a chair, but the glass wouldn't crack. I felt sweat roll down my back. I felt my knees shaking. I just wanted out. I wanted to leave this place and never come back. Now, as I stand here in the living room, I can see the mask hanging near the front door, smiling with that wide, distorted grin. My chest feels tight. My hands are shaky. I know it's still trying to replace me. I know it's still trying to get inside my mind and twist my feelings until I'm hollow. I have no one to call. The keys don't work. The windows don't open. The door doesn't lead anywhere safe. The mask is always here. I can't break it. I can't throw it out. I can't escape it. I stand in silence, staring at it. It stares back. It smiles as I feel nothing but dread. I remember it started on a cloudy afternoon. I was inside my house, walking from one room to another, trying to pass the time. The sky outside was dull and gray, and the light in each room felt weak and uneven. I was restless, moving around without much purpose, just checking things: furniture, windows, doors. I had an odd feeling in my stomach, maybe from not eating much that morning, or maybe from the heavy air. I didn't know at that point what was wrong, but something felt off. I first noticed it when I was crossing the living room. I saw my shadow on the floor, darker than usual because of the thick clouds outside. I was walking slowly, and my shadow seemed to lag behind. Normally, a shadow matches you perfectly. When you move, it moves. When you stop, it stops. But this time, I would lift my arm, and it would wait a second or two before doing the same. I paused, rubbed my eyes, and tried again. I raised my left hand to scratch my head, and my shadow didn't do it until I was already lowering my arm. It was delayed. I stood there, shifting my weight from one foot to the other, staring down at the shape on the floor. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe I was tired, or maybe the dull light through the windows was causing some strange effect. I turned on a lamp to see if it changed anything, but it didn't. The shadow kept acting strange. I moved into the hallway to test this. The hallway was narrow and the overhead light was brighter. I stretched my legs. I bent down. I swung my arms. Each time my shadow would respond only after a brief pause. If I waited and made no movement, my shadow stayed still. But when I moved, it followed late, as if it took a moment to notice what I was doing. I tried not to think too hard about it. I tried to laugh it off, muttering under my breath that I was losing it. I checked the time on my phone and considered calling someone, but I didn't feel like explaining this. I just wanted it to go away. I went to the kitchen. I filled a glass with water from the sink. I watched my shadow on the tiled floor as I raised the glass to my lips. When I took a sip, my shadow raised the glass a moment later, mimicking my action late. The delay was obvious. I placed the glass on the counter. My shadow placed it down right afterward, a second or two behind. I felt a chill at the back of my neck. My mouth was dry and my hands were shaky. I left the kitchen and walked into the bedroom, hoping that maybe in there, with different lighting, it would behave normally. But it didn't. In the bedroom, I tested it again. I jumped, I clapped my hands, I spun around. Each time my shadow was slow. I wondered if the overhead lights or the dim outdoor light had something to do with it, but that didn't really make sense. A shadow doesn't have a mind of its own. It can't decide when to move and when not to. But that's how it felt. I decided to ignore it. I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled through my phone, trying to distract myself. I avoided looking at the floor or the walls. I tried to focus on something else. After some time, I stood up and noticed something new. My shadow wasn't just delayed now. It was moving a bit faster than me in some cases, as if it was catching up. When I reached for the door handle, I saw the shadow's hand move toward the handle just before mine did. I felt my heart thumping hard in my chest. I froze, my fingers hovering above the metal knob. The shadow's hand hovered there too, almost guiding me. I stepped back and took a long breath. I felt sweat gathering under my arms and at the base of my spine. I walked around the bed, and the shadow moved along the floor. Now it felt like it anticipated my steps. When I lifted my right foot, the shadow's right foot was already lifting. When I turned toward the window, the shadow turned first, like it knew where I was going. I didn't like this. I rubbed my hands on my jeans and tried to tell myself it was some weird trick of the light. The sky was still gray. Maybe the shadows in the house were shifting as the sun moved behind the clouds. I tried to believe that. I left the bedroom and went into the hallway again. The hallway was long and had several closed doors, a bathroom door, a closet door, and a door to a spare room I barely used. The shadow on the wall next to me looked strange. It reached toward the spare room door before I did, pointing at it. I stopped walking. I looked at the door handle. I could touch it if I wanted to, but I saw the shadow's arm, extended, as if urging me to open that door. My stomach felt tight. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I didn't understand why it would do that. I stood still for a moment, then forced myself to turn around and walk the other way. The shadow moved more smoothly now, almost gliding ahead of my steps. It pointed to the bathroom door this time. I didn't like how it was pointing at closed doors. I wondered what would happen if I opened one, but I didn't want to find out. Instead, I went back to the living room. The space was bigger, with more open area. I thought maybe a larger space would make the shadow behave normally, but it didn't. I saw it stretch out across the floor and then climb up the wall. It stayed attached to me, still shaped like my body in some way, but it felt elastic, like it could extend and bend. I tried not to panic. I tried to think about something practical. Maybe if I turned on all the lights, I could get rid of it or make it less noticeable. I flipped on every switch I could find. The living room became bright and artificial, but the shadow was still there, darker than ever, moving slowly along the wall. I paced around, running my hand through my hair. I was breathing hard. I could smell my own sweat. I could feel my heart hammering. I didn't know what to do. I sat on the couch and tried not to look, but I could see it out of the corner of my eye, stretching upward, forming shapes on the ceiling. I saw what looked like a face forming in the darkness above me. It didn't have eyes or a mouth in a real sense, but the shape looked like a face pressed against a window, nose and forehead outlined by shadows. I stood up immediately, my knees feeling weak. I backed away and entered the hallway again. The shadow followed me or led me, I couldn't tell which. It ran ahead of me along the walls, touching the doors again, sliding under the gap at the bottom of the door to the spare room. I could see it moving under the door, as if it wanted me to open it and go inside. I refused. I felt my teeth clenching tight. I said something to myself, just a soft, "What the hell is going on?" My voice sounded shaky, and I didn't like hearing that. I stepped into the kitchen once more, trying to think of something else. I turned on the faucet and let cold water run over my wrists. I could feel the coolness. It calmed me a little. I looked down at the floor and saw the shadow creeping along behind me. I turned around and it was on the ceiling fan. It shaped itself around the blades, forming strange silhouettes that bent and twisted. I leaned against the counter and tried to breathe slowly in and out, focusing on the sound of running water. The shadow started moving more independently. I noticed it no longer cared about my posture. If I stood still, it would still move. It would stretch across the sink along the counter, then fold itself around the edges of the cabinets. It tried to form hands near the drawers. It looked like it was grabbing at the handles. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. My shirt stuck to my back. I turned around and it slid back onto the floor, moving toward me. I stepped back. It didn't touch me, but it hovered close, outlining my feet, then slipping away. I went to the front door of the house. I unlocked it and opened it. Outside, it was still cloudy, but there was a little more light out there. I thought maybe if I went outside, the shadow would fall into a normal pattern again, just a simple shape on the ground. I stepped onto the porch, checking behind me. The shadow followed. It came out onto the porch floor, but instead of flattening out like a normal shadow, it seemed to shift and sway. I walked down the small steps onto the front path. The wind blew softly and I could feel the air on my face. I looked down and saw the shadow stretched long, pointing toward my front door, as if urging me back inside. I refused and walked onto the lawn. I looked at the grass and tried to focus on the texture, on the color, on the dampness. Maybe if I grounded myself in something real, I could stop thinking about this. But even there, it didn't behave normally. On the lawn, the shadow hovered close to my body, but it wasn't steady. It wavered as if flickering. I lifted my arm. It lifted its arm with a slight lag again, but then caught up and tried to move ahead of me. I lowered my arm, and it did the same. I took a few steps around the yard. It followed. My breathing slowed down a bit. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was imagining things. But then it formed that face again, this time on the ground right in front of my feet. I could see the shape pressing up, almost like a bump in the grass. I stumbled back, nearly tripping. My heart raced again. I hurried back inside, shutting the door behind me. The shadow slipped inside too, along the floor, under the threshold. I locked the door. I knew that wouldn't stop it. I moved through the house, switching off some lights, turning others on, trying to find a pattern that fixed this. Nothing changed. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw my face sweaty and pale, my eyes darting around, my hair messy. Behind me on the tiled wall, I could see the shadow shifting. It looked like it was trying to climb the wall, forming strange lumps that resembled shoulders and heads. I turned around fast and it flattened out, following my movement again with a slight delay. I faced the mirror again. Now it reached toward the shower curtain, tugging at it. I grabbed the shower curtain and pulled it back, exposing the empty tub. The shadow spread over the white tub, making it look like a hole in the floor. I shook my head and stepped back. I didn't know what the shadow wanted. I didn't know if it wanted anything. It just seemed to move on its own, ignoring the normal rules of light and darkness. It pointed at doors, it formed faces and shapes, it twisted itself around furniture. It moved too slowly or too quickly, never in sync with me. I couldn't predict it. Every time I tried to catch it in the act, it shifted again. Every time I tried to ignore it, it would appear somewhere else, doing something strange. I tried leaving my house again. I opened the back door that led to a small patio. The light outside was dim, but a bit brighter than inside. I stepped onto the patio and turned around. The shadow was there on the ground, flat and dark. For a second, it looked normal. I moved my arm. The shadow moved its arm at the same time. I tried my leg. Same thing. Perfectly normal. My heart lifted slightly. Maybe it was over. But then it started drifting again. Just a little. Its arm didn't lower when I lowered mine. Instead, it stayed raised, pointing toward the house. I brought my arm down and stepped to the side. The shadow slowly lowered its arm after a few seconds, as if it realized it had been caught. I rushed back inside, slamming the door behind me. I checked each room carefully. The house was quiet. I could hear the faint sound of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear my own breath and the creaks in the floor when I moved. The shadow waited for me in the hallway, stretched thin and long along the wall. I could see it extend toward the spare room door again. My palms were sweating. I didn't want to open that door. I didn't want to see what would happen if I followed its silent suggestions. I backed away, returned to the living room, and sat down on the couch, keeping my eyes on the wall. I tried to remain still. If I didn't move, maybe it would stop. But even as I sat there, I could see it shifting at the edges of my vision. I turned my head a little and saw it creeping along the ceiling, forming lines and angles that looked like bent limbs. It made no noise. It had no smell. It was just a dark shape that refused to behave like a normal shadow. I stood up again, determined to ignore whatever it was trying to do. I walked back and forth between rooms, turning lights on and off, trying to find a pattern that made sense. Sometimes it lagged behind me. Sometimes it moved ahead of me. Sometimes it stretched into strange faces. Other times it just hovered, waiting. Each time I felt my chest tighten and my throat dry up. I wanted to scream at it, but I knew it wouldn't help. It wasn't listening. It had no ears. It was just there, doing what it wanted. The rest of that day, I stayed inside, checking every corner. The shadow never went away. It stayed with me, and I could feel its presence even when I tried not to look at it. When night fell, I turned on all the lights, but still it found places to stretch and bend. I saw it form lines under door frames, shapes on the ceiling, outlines on the walls. I couldn't find any reason for it. I couldn't make it stop. I just kept moving, pacing around, sitting and standing, opening and closing doors. It always followed. Now, sometimes responding too slowly, sometimes too quickly, but always there, always separate from me in some way I couldn't understand. By the time I finally sat down on the couch again, exhausted, I had stopped trying to figure it out. I just sat there, my eyes on the wall, feeling my heartbeat, feeling the sweat on my skin, listening to my own breathing, and knowing that behind me, on the floor, or on the wall, or on the ceiling, that shadow was still moving. It wasn't me controlling it. It was controlling me, or at least guiding my eyes, my steps, my thoughts. I stayed like that for a long time, too tense to sleep, too rattled to move, waiting to see what it would do next. I heard the suitcase long before I saw it. It was the middle of the night. I was in my bedroom. It was quiet, except for a low hum of distant traffic outside. Then came the soft sound of wheels rolling over a hard floor. I sat up and listened. It was steady, deliberate, like someone pushing a small cart along my hallway. I had no carts. I had one suitcase with wheels, but I had left it in the closet after returning from my trip. My heart started to pound. I got out of bed, turned on the hallway light, and there it was, my black suitcase sitting in the middle of the corridor. It was open about an inch, the handle extended. I stood there in my boxers, watching it, and it did not move. It was just a suitcase. Still, something felt wrong. My name is Dave, and this happened about a week ago. I live alone in a small apartment. It's on the third floor of an old building with thin walls and wooden floors. I had just come back from a short trip. It was nothing special, just 3 nights out of town for a work thing. When I got home, I put my suitcase away in the bedroom closet and locked my apartment door. I watched some TV, ate a sandwich, and went to bed. Nothing strange that first night. The next night I woke up because of that sound. Those little plastic wheels. My suitcase was in the hallway. It should have been in the closet with the door shut. I could not understand it. I thought maybe I had left it out. Maybe I was too tired when I got home, but I remembered putting it in the closet. I remembered lining it up beside my other travel bag. I picked up the suitcase and walked back to the closet. I opened the door. Everything else was in place. The vacuum, the old jackets, the extra pillows. I put the suitcase back inside. I closed the door. I tested the latch. It clicked into place. The closet door was old and sometimes a bit loose, so I turned the small lock on the knob. It wasn't a heavy-duty lock, just a cheap knob with a push-button lock. Still, it should hold the door closed. I went back to bed. My heart was still beating fast. I tried to think of a rational reason. Maybe the building was uneven. Maybe the suitcase rolled out on its own. That made no sense because I remembered placing it in the closet standing on its four wheels, handle retracted, stable. It would have to roll uphill to come out into the hallway. The hallway floor was flat and not slanted. I calmed myself down by thinking I must have been too tired to notice something. The next morning, I woke up and checked the hallway. The suitcase was not there. I felt relieved. I opened the closet door. It was right where I had placed it. I ran my hand along its surface. It felt normal, just a regular suitcase with plastic wheels and a telescoping handle. I tapped the wheels. They spun easily. I lifted it and shook it. Nothing inside but some leftover clothes I hadn't bothered to take out yet. Everything seemed normal. I pulled out all my clothes and put them away in my dresser. The suitcase was now empty. I closed it, locked the zipper, and put it back in the closet. Then I went to work. That night I couldn't sleep well. I lay in bed, waiting. Around 3 in the morning, I heard it again. The same sound. Wheels rolling across my floor. I froze. My breathing got shallow. My face got hot. I reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. I got up and walked slowly into the hallway. The suitcase was there again, this time right next to my bedroom door. Its handle was extended again. The zipper was partially open. I could see fabric inside, but it wasn't my clothes. I leaned forward and pulled the zipper open. Inside were some shirts and pants that I did not recognize. They looked worn, faded, and smelled like musty fabric. Underneath the clothes were sheets of paper covered in rough pencil marks. Nothing readable, just jagged lines and circles. It was like someone had scribbled nonsense all over them. I touched one of the shirts. It felt damp. I tried to calm myself, but my chest was tight and my forehead was sweating. I did not want this suitcase in my home. I decided to get rid of it. I grabbed it by the handle and dragged it out to the hallway near the front door. I put on some pants and a jacket. I stepped outside into the night. The hallway of the apartment building was quiet. The elevator was working. I took the suitcase downstairs and left it by the building's trash bins. I did not want to leave it inside the bin because it was large and would not fit. I left it on the ground in a corner. I felt strange doing this because it was still in good condition, but I wanted it gone. I went back upstairs and locked my door. I checked the closet. It was empty now. I went to bed. I slept a bit better after that. In the morning, I made coffee and looked out my window at the street below. I tried to convince myself that I had just imagined things. Maybe I had mixed up my luggage with someone else's at the airport. Maybe I brought home the wrong suitcase and it had some weird mechanism that made it roll around if not placed properly. That sounded stupid, but I needed an explanation. When I left for work, I passed by the trash bins. The suitcase was gone. Someone must have taken it. Good. I went to work and tried to focus on my job, but I was distracted. Every time I heard a rolling sound in the office, like a chair moving or a cart passing, I got tense. I came home that evening and everything seemed normal. I watched TV, ate a microwave dinner, and went to bed early. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a dull thump. I sat up and listened. Then the rolling sound started again. I turned on the lights, my heart racing. The suitcase was at the foot of my bed. It was the same suitcase, no doubt. Black with a small scratch near one corner. Same handle, same wheels. The zipper was half open again. I could see those strange clothes inside, along with the sheets of scribbled paper. I got out of bed and backed away until I hit the wall. I did not understand how it could be here. I had thrown it out. I locked my door every night. My windows were closed. I had no roommate. I stood there in my bedroom, breathing hard, feeling sweat on my back. My arms felt weak. I grabbed the suitcase again and took it back to the closet. I opened the closet door and threw it inside. I slammed the door. I turned the lock. I moved a heavy chair from my kitchen and wedged it under the doorknob. I tried to sleep on my couch, but I kept staring at the closet door. I did not sleep until morning. When I checked the closet after sunrise, the suitcase was still inside. I opened it carefully. The clothes inside were not mine. They smelled stale. They felt damp. The scribbled papers were all over the place. I tried to smooth one out. It had pencil lines going in all directions, some thick, some thin. No words, no recognizable shapes, just chaos. I took all the clothes out. There were a few shirts and pants, all different sizes, none of them mine. Some had strange stains. I set them aside. At the bottom of the suitcase, I found a small metal object. It looked like a broken zipper pull. I put it on the floor. Then I closed the suitcase and stepped back. I decided to leave the apartment. I took the suitcase down to my car. I drove about 15 minutes to a large dumpster behind a grocery store. I tossed the suitcase inside. I left quickly. When I got home, I checked every room and closet. The suitcase was not there. I felt relieved. I made dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed at a normal time. At around 1 a.m, I woke up to the sound of something sliding against wood. I turned on the light. The suitcase was there, in the hallway, leaning against the wall. It was the same suitcase. I could feel my face getting hot again, my breathing turning shallow. I walked up to it and kicked it. It fell over with a dull thud. It felt solid. I grabbed it and shook it hard. Inside, something rattled. I opened it and saw more papers. This time, some were torn. The clothes were back too, folded in a rough way. They looked even dirtier now. I realized that this suitcase would not leave me alone. I did not understand how it kept returning. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That my suitcase kept rolling around on its own? They would think I was crazy. I decided to try something else. I would examine the suitcase carefully. Maybe there was a clue inside. Maybe there was a name or an address somewhere. I took it into the kitchen and turned on the bright overhead light. I opened it fully. I took out each piece of clothing and laid it on the table. There were 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and 1 jacket. None of them fit me. They had no brand tags. They smelled damp and old. I checked the pockets. I found bits of thread, a bent paperclip, and a tiny piece of chalk. The papers were a stack of folded sheets covered in pencil scribbles. I took one sheet and tried to see if there were hidden letters. Nothing. Just random lines and circles. I felt a cold sensation on my arms and neck. I started sweating. My stomach felt tight. I wanted to throw everything out the window. But that wouldn't help. The suitcase would return. I needed to do something different. I decided to write down what was happening. I took my own notepad and wrote the date and time. I wrote that I found the suitcase again, that it had clothes and papers inside, that it would not stay away. I hoped that by keeping track, I could find a pattern. I tried something else that night. I placed the suitcase in the bathroom, on the tiled floor. I closed the door. I wedged a chair against it. I went back to bed. I tried to stay awake. I dozed off after a few hours. When I woke up at dawn, I rushed to the bathroom. I turned on the light. The suitcase was gone. I found it in my living room, sitting near the window. The bathroom door was still closed, the chair still in place. My head hurt. My chest felt tight. I tried not to panic. I thought about leaving the apartment for good, maybe finding a hotel for a few days. But I knew that would not solve the problem. The suitcase appeared wherever it wanted. I needed to figure out what it wanted. I took out the scribbled papers again. I tried to rearrange them on the floor. If I put them side by side, maybe the lines would connect. After about an hour, I managed to arrange them in a way that formed a crude pattern. It looked like a floor plan of an apartment. There were squares and rectangles that could have been rooms. There was a small symbol that looked like a closet. I compared it to my own apartment layout. I recognized where my closet would be on this rough sketch. In the center of the drawing, there was a large X mark. I checked the corresponding spot in my apartment. It would be on the hallway floor near where I first found the suitcase. I got down on my knees and tapped the floor. It sounded hollow at that spot. I pried at the floorboards with a screwdriver. After a few minutes, I lifted one loose board. Underneath, I found a small compartment with a piece of rolled-up fabric and some more papers. These papers had the same scribbles, but also a few numbers. They looked like dates. The fabric was a torn piece of shirt with a faint name tag stitched inside. The name was unreadable. I replaced the board and stood up, feeling lightheaded. The suitcase was behind me, resting against the wall. It did not move. I opened it and placed the newly found papers inside. I placed the torn fabric inside as well. Then I closed the suitcase and stood it upright. It felt heavier now, as if it approved of what I had done. I waited. That night, I stayed awake until late. The suitcase did not roll around. It stayed where I left it, in the living room. I woke up several times and it had not moved. I felt a small sense of relief. In the morning, I opened it again. The clothes and papers were still there, undisturbed. I took a deep breath and took out the papers with the numbers. I tried to read them. They might have been dates or some kind of code. I wrote them down in my notebook. Nothing made sense. But the suitcase seemed calmer now, if that's possible. It did not appear by my bed at night. It stayed put. Over the next few days, I experimented with the suitcase. I tried placing it back in the closet. It stayed there until the next morning. I tried locking it in the bathroom. It stayed there, no movement. I tried putting the strange clothes and papers in different orders inside it. Each time, nothing unusual happened. The suitcase remained where I left it. I don't know what it wanted or why it came to me in the first place. Maybe it just wanted me to find that hidden compartment under the floor. Maybe it wanted me to put those papers inside it to keep them safe. I never understood the scribbles or the strange clothes. I never found out who they belonged to. But after I placed those hidden items inside, the suitcase stopped roaming around at night. It became just an object again. I still have it. I keep it in the closet. I lock the closet door and wedge a chair against it. I cannot forget the sound of those wheels on the floor. I cannot forget the smell of those strange clothes. Every night I listen carefully. Most nights I hear nothing. On some nights I think I hear a faint scraping sound, but when I turn on the lights, the suitcase hasn't moved. I check inside it sometimes. The clothes remain folded. The papers remain scribbled. Nothing changes. I cannot say I am at peace, but I learned to live with it. I do not try to throw it away anymore. It always comes back. It stays with me, silent and heavy. I watch it from a distance. I keep my apartment well lit at night. I sleep lightly. Every time I hear a noise, I get up and check the closet. The suitcase is always there, never closer than before. I do not know why it chose me. I do not know what message it carried. I know only what I saw and heard. I accept it because I have no choice. I do not want to lose my mind over this. I just keep going. I found the radio in my basement after I decided to clear out some old boxes. It was late afternoon. I remember the smell of damp cardboard and dust. My wrists were sore from lifting heavy crates. I saw the radio behind a wooden chest. It was small, about the size of a hardcover book. with a dull metal frame and an old plastic antenna. Its surface was scratched. The speaker grill looked rusted in spots. The tuning knob felt stiff when I turned it. I didn't recognize the brand. There was no label on the front, just a small dial, a volume knob, and a battery compartment on the back. I carried it upstairs and placed it on a table next to my old TV. I wanted to see if it worked. I didn't expect much. Maybe I was curious because I never saw it before. I lived alone in that house for a few years, but I never paid much attention to the basement. I figured it belonged to whoever lived here before me. I put in some fresh batteries that I had lying around. At first, there was only static. I twisted the tuning knob back and forth. Nothing clear came through. Just a few patches of faint radio chatter, muffled music, and the usual hiss. I set it aside, a bit disappointed. It was getting late, and I was hungry. I left the radio off and ate a sandwich in the kitchen. That night I felt uneasy for no reason. I tried to ignore it. I sat in my living room watching TV. Around midnight I heard something strange. It sounded like low voices coming from the other room. I turned the TV volume down and listened. The voices were not coming from outside. I got up and walked slowly towards the table where I had left the radio. The radio was on. I knew I had turned it off. The volume was low, but I could hear strange chanting. It sounded like a group of people singing in a language I couldn't understand. Their voices were deep and rough. There were low hums and short bursts of words with hard consonants. Sometimes I heard what sounded like a distant choir, but it was muffled, like it came through thick walls. I reached for the volume knob to turn it down. The knob felt stiff. I twisted harder, and the volume didn't change. I tried the power switch. I flipped it off. The chanting continued. The little red power light stayed lit. I pressed the switch again, holding it down. Nothing. I pulled the radio's antenna down and tried again. The chanting kept going. I felt a cold feeling in my stomach. I told myself it was just some weird malfunction. Maybe the switch was broken. I pulled out the batteries. They came out easily, and I held them in my hand. The radio stayed on. The chanting never stopped. I shook the radio, tapped the side with my palm. No effect. It still chanted in that strange language. The sound was steady, not loud, but very clear. I put it in a closet and closed the door. I stood there in silence for a minute. I tried to think logically. Maybe it had some internal power source. But it was old and looked cheap. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep well. I kept hearing the chanting through the closet door. At some point, I put a pillow over my head and managed to sleep until sunrise. In the morning, I checked the radio again. It was silent now. The power light was off. I tried turning it on again. This time, it didn't work at all. No noise, no light. I inserted the batteries again, still nothing. I shrugged and left it on the table. I went to work, trying not to think about it. That evening, I came home and ate a quick dinner. I tried turning on the radio again out of curiosity. Nothing happened. I felt relieved. Maybe it was just a weird one-time thing. The night passed quietly. I slept fine. The next day was normal. I worked, came home, had a small meal, watched some TV, and then tried to sleep around midnight. The house was quiet. Then I heard it again. The chanting started from the other room. My heart started pounding. I got up and walked towards the table. The radio was on by itself again. The same voices, the same chanting, the same strange rhythm. I tried to unplug it from the wall, but it wasn't even plugged in. I had put batteries in it earlier, but that shouldn't matter. When I had tried earlier in the evening, it did nothing. Now in the middle of the night, it decided to work on its own again. I tried removing the batteries again. The sound kept playing. The voices seemed a bit louder this time. I pressed the power button hard. I twisted the volume knob until my fingertips hurt. Nothing stopped it. I opened the back of the radio and looked inside. I saw basic wiring, a small circuit board, and nothing else. No hidden power source. I couldn't understand it. My forehead felt sweaty. The chanting made me feel tense. I took a thick blanket and wrapped the radio in it. I carried it down to the basement and left it there on a shelf. I closed the basement door and went upstairs. I could still hear something very faint like a rumble or distant voices, but I wasn't sure if it was real or just in my head. The next morning I went down to check the radio. It was off again. I unwrapped it, tried turning it on. Nothing. I felt stupid. Maybe I imagined the whole thing, but I knew I hadn't. I didn't know what else to do. I left it in the basement this time. I tried to forget about it. I decided not to touch it for a while. That night, around the same time, I heard a strange buzzing sound in my bedroom. I sat up in bed. At first I thought it was coming from the window, maybe a car outside, but it had the same quality as the radio's static. I listened closely. The buzzing turned into soft chanting. The words were still unclear. I recognized the pattern. It was the same rhythm as before. I felt a chill. The radio was in the basement, wrapped in a blanket. There was no way it could be heard upstairs, but I heard it as if it were right next to me. I got up, went downstairs, and opened the basement door. The chanting was louder now, filling the stairwell. I turned on the basement light and walked down slowly. The radio sat exactly where I left it. It was turned off. The power light was off. I leaned in close. The sound wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from somewhere in the room, but I couldn't pinpoint where. I checked every corner. There was nothing. No speakers, no other devices. Just old boxes, tools, and the radio. I was shaking. My hands felt cold. I carried the radio upstairs, opened the front door, and threw it outside into a trash bin near the sidewalk. I slammed the door shut. I felt relief for a moment. I couldn't hear chanting now. I climbed back into bed and lay there listening to my own breathing. After a few minutes, I heard something again. It started as a low hum in my ears. Then I recognized voices. Guttural chanting, the same words I couldn't understand. The radio was gone, but I could still hear it. I sat on the edge of my bed, pressing my palms against my ears. The sound didn't go away. It seemed to come from inside my head. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I looked outside. The trash bin was still there. I looked inside. The radio was gone. I tried not to think about it. I went to work, feeling tired and unfocused. At my desk, I kept hearing faint whispers. Sometimes, when I turned my head, I thought I heard a familiar chant. I tried to ignore it. That evening, I heard something new. The voices weren't just chanting now. They seemed to sing in patterns that made me feel uneasy. The melodies rose and fell in a way that reminded me of tension, like they were trying to pull something out of me. My stomach felt tight, and I had trouble breathing. I rubbed my eyes and splashed water on my face. I kept looking for the source, but there was nothing. The radio was gone. My house was quiet, yet I still heard them. Over the next few nights, the sound changed. Each night, the chanting and humming turned into something else. It sounded like sharp, rattling tones mixed with whispers and muffled bangs. Sometimes I heard heavy breathing. Sometimes I heard what sounded like low laughter. Other times, it was just a steady hiss with random bursts of that language I didn't recognize. I tried turning on the TV or playing music to drown it out, but it didn't help. I heard it through everything else. Even when I focused on something else, I could sense it in the back of my mind. My appetite got worse. I had trouble eating because I felt tense. My hands sometimes shook when the chanting got intense. My jaw tightened and my neck stiffened. I tried leaving the house for a while. I walked around the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air would help. But even outside, I caught myself listening for those voices. At times it was quieter, but then I'd pick up a hint of that strange singing in the rumble of distant traffic or the hum of a streetlight. One night, I thought I found a solution. I took some old earplugs and stuffed them deep in my ears. It reduced the outside noise, but I still heard the chanting as clearly as before. The sound didn't depend on my ears. It was like my brain had learned a new frequency. I tried sleeping in the living room with all the lights on. It made no difference. After a few days, I realized the chanting sometimes synced with my heartbeat. When I felt nervous, it got louder, and the voices seemed to push harder against my mind. When I managed to stay calm, it settled into a low murmur. But staying calm was hard. Every time I tried to relax, the voices changed their pattern, adding new sounds that made me flinch. I felt sweaty and restless. My legs cramped from pacing around the house. I tapped my fingers on the table, trying to distract myself. I considered seeing a doctor, but what would I say? I was scared they would lock me up or put me on heavy medication. I tried to handle it on my own. I avoided looking in mirrors because sometimes I thought I saw my mouth moving when I heard the chanting, like I was whispering along without knowing it. I began to speak aloud to myself, simple words, trying to block out the chanting with my own voice. It didn't help. Over time, I noticed the chanting focused on certain patterns late at night. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, the voices got more complex. They mixed in low growls and deep humming that made my chest feel tight. My palms got sweaty. My throat felt dry. I swallowed hard, trying to clear it. Sometimes my ears rang after a particularly intense sequence of sounds, like a high-pitched tone would stick in my head for minutes at a time. I tried sleeping pills. I took a double dose one night, hoping to knock myself out. I ended up lying in bed, half-dazed, still hearing the chanting. The pills made my body heavy, but I couldn't escape the sound. I woke up the next morning feeling groggy and weak. The voices were quieter during the day, but still there in the background. At work, I struggled to concentrate. The computer screen blurred. I typed the wrong words. I stared at documents and couldn't read more than a sentence before hearing another chant in my head. I stopped watching TV or listening to music because it felt pointless. The chanting overpowered everything else. I thought about trying to destroy the place where I found the radio. Maybe if I smashed that shelf in the basement. I went down there one afternoon and looked around. The basement smelled musty. The shelf was old and dusty. I kicked it hard. It creaked. I knocked the boxes to the floor. Inside one box, I found old newspapers and some broken tools. Nothing special. I shouted at the walls, cursing the radio, but I only heard my own voice echo. The chanting was softer at that moment, almost patient, waiting for me to give up. One night I tried leaving all the lights on and standing in the bathroom with the shower running. The sound of water usually relaxed me, but it was useless now. I pressed my forehead against the bathroom tiles. They felt cool. The chanting got louder again, as if mocking me. I clenched my teeth and tried to ignore it. My heart pounded. I could feel sweat rolling down my neck. I turned off the shower and dried my face with a towel. I stared at the bathroom door. I listened carefully. The chanting was right there, so close. Over the next few days, I started to get used to it. I couldn't escape the voices, so I tried to live with them. I focused on simple tasks: eating, cleaning, trying to sleep. The chanting never stopped. It changed every night, shifting tones and rhythms. Sometimes it sounded angry, other times neutral. Once in a while, I heard a series of sharp clicks and guttural syllables that made my stomach twist. I tried not to think about what it meant. I just kept moving forward day by day. I never found the radio again. It disappeared after I threw it away. I never told anyone about it. I never called a repairman or contacted anyone who might know about strange radios. I kept to myself. The chanting was my problem now. At night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. The voices filled my head with their constant presence. I breathed slowly, trying not to panic. My muscles were tense all the time, my back ached. My shoulders felt stiff. I drank more water, hoping to calm down. It didn't help. As the weeks passed, I learned to do things despite the chanting. I went to work, cooked meals, and tried to read. The chanting stayed. It haunted every moment, but I kept going. I couldn't shut it off, couldn't remove its batteries. It was inside my head now, and that was that. The chanting never faded completely. Even now, as I sit here telling this, I can hear it. It's a low hum behind my thoughts, always waiting for the night to come so it can rise again. Just like that first time I couldn't turn the radio off. I pulled up the last floorboard and saw something I had never seen in my life. It was late afternoon, and I had dust in my hair, sweat on my back, and a dull ache in my shoulders. The floor looked normal at first, just some old wood, but I noticed strange marks carved into the underside of a few planks. They were small and uneven, like symbols or letters I couldn't recognize. I leaned in close. I saw thin lines, some wavy, some curved. They looked intentional. I didn't know what to think. I tried to ignore it, but those marks felt wrong. I ran my finger over them. The grooves were shallow but distinct. I didn't like it. I laid the new boards down and pretended it was nothing. I told myself I was just tired. I had decided to replace the flooring in my living room because the old boards were warped. The house was old, and I wanted a stable surface. I had pulled the old boards up and hauled them outside. I had a pile of new boards ready. I could have called a professional, but I wanted to save money. I'm no expert, but I can handle a few nails and a level. Anyway, I'd never seen weird carvings like that before. When I finished putting the new boards in place, I felt uneasy. I noticed a strange smell. Maybe just damp wood, but it made me feel off. I swept the sawdust away and cleaned my tools. I stood back and looked at the new floor. Everything looked fine now that it was in place. I tried to forget the strange symbols. That night I couldn't sleep well. I lay in bed with my eyes open, staring at the dark ceiling. Around midnight I heard a faint noise coming from the living room. It sounded like light scratching. I held my breath and listened. It came in short bursts, like something rubbing or sliding gently. I thought maybe a branch outside was hitting the siding. I got up, walked into the living room, and stood in the doorway. The room was dark except for a dim glow from the streetlight outside. The new floorboards were flat and clean. I listened. I heard a slight creaking sound. The boards had settled, maybe. Houses make noises at night. I left it at that and went back to bed. In the morning I made coffee and went to check the floor. Everything looked normal. I had my coffee mug in one hand and ran my other hand along the boards. They felt smooth. No gaps, no rot. I tried stepping lightly. The board squeaked under my foot, a normal sound. But as I walked across, I noticed a subtle pattern. The squeaks rose and fell in a certain order. It was like the floor had a rhythm. I stepped more carefully. The boards made a gentle, low sound each time I put weight on them. When I stopped walking, the sound stopped. I crouched down and pressed my ear against the floor. At first, I heard nothing but my own breathing. Then I heard a soft, thin sound. It wasn't squeaking. It was like a whisper coming through layers of wood. I couldn't make out words, just a faint murmur. I got up feeling strange. I felt a slight stiffness in my neck and a tightness in my chest. I tried to ignore it and went on with my day. I ran errands, bought groceries, came home, cooked dinner. I avoided the living room as much as I could. I stayed in the kitchen and bedroom most of the time. Around evening, I decided to sit in the living room chair and watch TV. The chair was heavy and had been in the same spot for weeks. I sat down and turned the TV on low volume. The news anchor talked about the weather. I tried to focus on that. After a few minutes, I heard soft creaks. I muted the TV and listened. The floor creaked even though I wasn't moving. I leaned forward, and the board beneath my feet made a long, low groan. It didn't sound random. It sounded like something pushing up from underneath. I turned the TV off and got on my knees. I pressed my ear to the wood. I heard more distinct whispers. They were quiet, muffled, but I could catch a few things that sounded like words. They weren't words I understood. They had a pattern, like a language, but I didn't know any language that sounded like that. I listened longer. Sometimes I thought I heard references to places. I couldn't be sure. The whispers came in short bursts, as if a few voices were talking among themselves. I got up, feeling uneasy. My stomach felt tense. My arms and legs felt tight. My heart beat harder. I walked out of the living room and closed the door behind me. I spent the rest of the evening in my bedroom. I tried reading a magazine, but I kept listening for sounds from the living room. The house was silent for a while. I relaxed a little. Then, late at night, I heard faint noises through the wall. The living room shared a wall with my bedroom. I heard a low, scraping sound and a tapping that came in slow, steady intervals. I pressed my hand against the wall and felt a slight vibration. I didn't know what to do. I turned on all the lights in my bedroom. I paced around. I felt sweat on the back of my neck. The house smelled stale. I tried opening a window for fresh air. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside. That seemed normal, which helped me calm down a bit. But when I closed the window, the quiet returned, and I swore I heard something shift behind the wall. The next day, I tried to be practical. Maybe I hadn't installed the floor properly. Maybe boards were rubbing against each other and producing weird sounds. I got my tools and checked the edges of the boards. Everything seemed tight. I tried stepping around to see if any boards were loose. They all felt solid under my shoes. But each step produced a quiet groan. The pattern of sounds felt deliberate. I tried stomping once. It produced a louder creak that faded slowly. As it faded, I thought I heard a whisper, like someone responding. I stomped again. Another whisper. I stopped immediately. I backed away. My legs felt shaky. I didn't understand how that could be happening. I considered calling someone, a friend maybe, to come over and listen, but I felt embarrassed. I had no proof. It would just sound like I was anxious over normal house noises. Still, that evening I invited a friend. He came over around dusk. I didn't say much. I just said I wanted him to check out the new floor. He walked in and stood there. He said it looked fine. I told him to listen. We stood quietly. After a while, he said he heard a faint squeaking. He shrugged. "Houses settle," he said. "Maybe some moisture in the beams." I nodded. I didn't push it. He drank a beer and talked about something else. He left before it got late. After he left, I paced in the living room. The floor creaked each time I moved, and I tried to ignore the pattern. But when I stood still, I heard the whispers again. This time, they mentioned something that sounded like a place name, but not one I recognized. I heard soft consonants and strange syllables. It made no sense. I slept badly again. Every few hours, I woke up to small tapping noises. I rolled over and tried covering my ears with a pillow. In the morning, I tried to record the sounds with my phone. I set my phone on the floor and hit record. For a few minutes, I walked around the house, leaving the phone there. When I played it back, I heard quiet creaks, and in the background, a faint murmuring. It sounded like voices, but too quiet and distorted to understand. This made me feel worse. It meant the sounds were not in my head. They were there, on the recording. Over the next few days, things got more intense. I avoided stepping into the living room. I started walking around the house by going outside and entering through another door to reach the kitchen. The living room was at the center of the house, and avoiding it made my movements awkward. But I didn't care. I didn't want to stand on that floor. I felt uneasy just thinking about it. My neck and shoulders felt stiff all the time. My appetite dropped. I ate simple food and tried to distract myself, but every few hours I heard faint noises in the walls. The whispers traveled. I heard them near the baseboards in the hallway. I pressed my ear there and heard them softly. They came in short segments like broken conversations. I decided to pull up one of the floorboards again. Maybe I'd find something underneath. Late one afternoon, I pried up a corner board in the living room. The space underneath looked normal at first. Just a subfloor and some beams. I shone a flashlight in there. The wood looked old, dry, and rough. I didn't see any wires or pipes that might explain the sounds. I tried listening. With my head close to the opening, I heard a dry whisper, like air moving through cracks. It sounded like a voice speaking a language I didn't know. I tapped the subfloor beam with my fingernail. The whisper stopped for a moment and then started again. I didn't like being so close to it. My skin crawled, and the back of my scalp tingled. I replaced the board and stepped back. I tried covering the floor with a thick rug. I unrolled a heavy rug and placed it over the center of the living room. I put a coffee table on top. I hoped that would dampen the sound. It didn't. That night, the whispering sounds seemed to come through the walls again, reaching into the hallway and even into the bedroom. I listened with the lights on. The house felt cramped and warm. I opened windows, but the night air didn't help. I tried playing music to drown it out. The whispers persisted, just under the volume of the music as if they were inside the structure of the house. I tried to seal the baseboards with caulk. I thought maybe there were tiny gaps causing the noise. I spent a whole afternoon applying a bead of caulk around the edges of the room. My knees hurt from kneeling. After I finished, I stood back, sweating. I listened. At first, nothing. I relaxed slightly. Then I heard a soft tapping. It came from inside the wall. I tapped the wall back with my knuckle. The whispering started again, low and steady. I could not understand it, but it felt angry or annoyed. My heart raced, and my hands trembled. I backed away from the wall, turned around, and went to the kitchen. I tried moving some furniture against the living room walls. I pushed a heavy shelf against one wall and a dresser against another. Maybe I could block the sound. It didn't work. At night, as I tried to sleep, I heard something move behind the dresser. The wood creaked. The floor in the living room made a long, low groan. I got up, paced the hallway, and rubbed my eyes. I felt exhausted. My head hurt. My stomach was unsettled. The whispers came and went in waves. Sometimes they were very faint, and I almost convinced myself they were gone. Other times they became clearer, like several voices talking. They described places I had never heard of. Sometimes they sounded like they were giving directions. Other times it sounded like they were talking about objects or events. I could never piece it together. It felt wrong, like something that shouldn't be there. I stopped using the living room entirely. I ate in the kitchen, slept in the bedroom, and spent most of my time in other parts of the house. But the whispers spread. I heard them at the thresholds between rooms. I heard them under the door frames. I even heard them behind the bathroom mirror when everything else was quiet. I couldn't relax anywhere. I tried leaving the house for a few hours. I went for a long drive. Outside, everything was normal. Cars passed by. People walked on the sidewalk. Stores were open. I grabbed a coffee to go and drank it in my car. I felt calm for a moment, but I knew I had to go back home eventually. When I returned, I entered through the back door. I tried not to look at the living room. I walked straight to the bedroom. I heard a faint murmur through the walls. I pulled out my phone and tried playing music again. I turned the volume up. I could still hear the soft whispers underneath. I went to the garage, found some thick foam panels, and started putting them up inside the living room, covering parts of the walls. It looked ridiculous, but I tried anyway. No change. The whispers cut right through. I put on heavy boots and stomped on the living room floor, trying to break the pattern. My stomping produced loud cracks, and I shouted for it to stop. I waited. The floor made a soft, whining noise. Then the whispers came right back. They sounded more agitated now, as if responding to my aggression. I stopped. My throat felt dry. I grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen and drank it down in one go. I wiped sweat off my forehead. I tried sleeping on the couch in the hallway, but I couldn't stay asleep. Around midnight, I heard tapping along the wall behind me. It sounded like knuckles on wood. I turned on every light in the house, hoping the brightness would help me stay calm. The lights didn't affect the sound. The whispers were always there, just under the surface of the wood, inside the walls, in the floor, in the baseboards. I thought about ripping the entire floor out again, but I didn't have the energy. Also, I was afraid of what I might find. I didn't know if I would uncover more symbols. I didn't know if I would hear louder voices. The idea made my stomach twist. I decided to just stay out of the living room. I avoided it completely. I tried sleeping with headphones on. I listened to static, thinking it might drown them out. It helped a little, but whenever I took the headphones off, I heard them again. I kept trying small things. I placed heavy objects on the floor. I sprayed cleaner into every corner. I tightened screws in the subfloor. Nothing worked. The whispering persisted. I started hearing it in the middle of the day. I might be cleaning the kitchen counter or folding laundry, and I would hear a faint whisper behind me. I turned around fast. The house looked still, but the sound continued. It was impossible to ignore now. I felt a constant tightness in my shoulders and neck. My eyes twitched when I focused too long. My hands felt clammy. I noticed my breathing was shallow and quick. I tried taking deep breaths. I tried leaving the TV on loud, but it didn't help. The whispers were always there, in the background, coming through the wood, through the walls, through every corner of the house. I didn't know who they belonged to. I didn't know what they wanted. I only knew that they would not stop. I saw the phone in a corner of the antique store. It was on a low shelf behind a few old lamps and cracked picture frames. It had a black rotary dial, a heavy body, and a rough cord. It looked worn. There were scratches on the sides and small chips around the edges. I wiped some dust off with my thumb. My hand smelled like old paper and metal after I touched it. I asked the owner how much it cost. He shrugged and said a price that seemed low. I thought it could be an interesting decoration in my living room. I paid in cash and took it home. I live alone in a small one-story house at the end of a quiet street. The inside is simple. There is a living room with a couch, a coffee table, a TV, and a few lamps. The kitchen is close by. The hallway leads to the bedroom and bathroom. Everything is plain. I don't keep many personal items. I work a normal job, and I like silence. I placed the old phone on a side table near the couch. I found an outlet near the floor and tried to plug it in. The connector didn't fit well. I tried to adjust it. There was no dial tone when I lifted the receiver. I tried tapping the cradle. Nothing happened. I left it there and decided it would just be a decoration. That night I fell asleep at around midnight. I was tired from work. The room was dark and quiet. At some point, I heard a sound. At first I thought it was the wind outside. Then I realized it was a ringing sound. It took me a few seconds to understand that it was the old phone. I got up, turned on the bedside lamp, and walked into the living room. The phone rang again. The sound was dull and muffled. It didn't sound like a normal phone. It sounded like someone shaking loose metal inside a box. I picked up the receiver. I said hello. I heard nothing. I listened for a moment. There was only a faint static noise. I said hello again. Then I heard breathing. It was slow, uneven breathing. I stayed still. My heart beat faster. I asked who it was. Silence for a few seconds. Then I heard a soft laugh. It sounded close, like someone standing right next to me. I felt a small jolt in my chest. I asked again who it was. Nothing. The line went dead. I put the receiver down. I looked around my living room. The air felt colder. I noticed my arms had goosebumps. I walked to the thermostat. The temperature had dropped a few degrees. I flipped the light switch a few times because the lamp by the couch was flickering. I felt a slight pressure against the back of my neck, like fingers brushing my hair. I turned around fast and saw nothing. I stood there breathing hard. My teeth clenched. I switched off the lamp and then turned it on again. The flickering stopped. The cold feeling lingered. I went back to bed. I tried to sleep, but I kept thinking about that phone call. Maybe it was a prank, maybe some kind of interference. I told myself that the phone wasn't even plugged in properly. It shouldn't ring. I planned to ignore it if it happened again. The next day I came home after work and checked the phone. It was still on the table. I lifted the receiver. No dial tone. I tapped the cradle. No sound. I considered throwing it out, but I felt a strange reluctance. It seemed harmless now, just an object. I made dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed early. Around 2 in the morning, the ringing woke me again. I sat up right away. The ringing sounded louder this time. I got out of bed and stood in the hallway. The living room was dark. The phone rang again. I refused to answer. I stood there, clenching my fists. breathing through my nose, trying to calm myself. The phone kept ringing. It didn't stop. After at least a minute, I felt something vibrate under my feet. It felt like a tremor or a faint rumble. I stepped forward. The ringing got sharper. It made my head ache. The phone seemed to be demanding my attention. I entered the living room and looked at it. The phone shook a little on the table. I backed up. I saw my reflection in the TV screen. My eyes looked tired. I decided to pick it up. I just wanted to end the noise. I lifted the receiver. I kept silent this time. The breathing returned. It sounded more ragged. I heard faint tapping sounds. I said one word. "Who?" A small laugh again. It sounded more like a hiss. I asked what it wanted. It did not answer. I heard a crackling sound. Then nothing. I set the receiver down. The lamp in the corner flickered. The temperature dropped again. This time I felt the cold air against my face. I shivered and rubbed my arms. I heard a scraping sound from somewhere behind me. I whipped around. The coffee table shifted slightly as if someone nudged it. I stepped back. My throat felt dry. I went to the kitchen and drank some water. My head felt heavy. When I returned to the living room, everything was still. The phone looked normal again. The next morning, I unplugged the phone line from the wall. I took the phone and placed it in a closet in the hallway. I locked the closet door. I had no reason to keep it out. I wanted it away. I thought this would solve the problem. I went to work and tried to focus, but I kept thinking about that breathing and that laugh. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. Maybe I dreamed it, but the flickering lights and the cold air felt real. My skin crawled when I remembered that touch on my neck. That night, I lay in bed reading on my phone. Around midnight, I heard a muffled ringing sound. It came from the closet. My stomach tightened. I turned on all the lights in the house. I walked slowly to the closet. The ringing continued. I could feel vibrations through the floor. I gripped the doorknob, then let go. I backed away. The ringing got louder. I decided to ignore it. I walked away, sat on the couch, and turned on the TV. The TV turned itself off. The lamp flickered until it went dark. The temperature dropped again. I could see my breath in the air. I leaned forward, breathing fast. My heart pounded. The phone kept ringing. I clenched my jaw. Then it stopped for a second. Silence. I waited. Then the closet door rattled. I jumped off the couch and backed into the hallway. The door rattled again. Something inside the closet knocked against the wood. I heard the faint laugh again, but now without the receiver. It came from behind the door. My forehead felt damp with sweat. I decided I had to answer the phone. I ran to the closet, opened it quickly, grabbed the phone, and lifted the receiver. "Stop," I said, my voice shaking, breathing on the other end. I tried to stay calm. I told it to leave me alone. No answer. I said I would get rid of it. The breathing paused, then a soft clicking sound, then a quiet laugh, shorter this time. I asked again who it was. Nothing. I slammed the receiver down and put the phone on the closet shelf. The air felt heavy. My shoulders ached. I closed the closet door and leaned against it. The temperature slowly returned to normal. The lights in the hallway flickered twice, then stopped. I didn't sleep well that night. In the morning, I felt exhausted. I made coffee and stared at the closet door. I decided to get rid of the phone. I called the antique store, but no one picked up. I tried again. Still no answer. After work, I came home and opened the closet. The phone sat on the shelf, silent. I took it out and placed it on the kitchen table. I examined it closely. The dial was stiff. The cord felt rough. The plastic casing smelled musty. There was no brand name. I saw faint markings on the back. They looked like scratches, random shapes. I rubbed them with my thumb. I felt a slight static shock. I pulled my hand back. I wanted to throw it in the trash. but I was nervous. I worried it might still ring from the dumpster. That sounded crazy, but nothing made sense anymore. Instead, I took it outside. It was dark, about 9 p.m. I put it in the trunk of my car. I drove across town to a strip mall. There was a dumpster behind the grocery store. I dropped the phone in there and walked away. On the drive home, I felt relieved. My head felt clear. I entered my house. It was quiet. The air felt normal. I watched TV, took a shower, and got ready for bed. Just as I lay down, I heard something in the living room. It sounded like a soft thud. My chest tightened. I got up and walked slowly down the hallway. The lamp by the couch flickered. I saw the phone on the coffee table. My legs felt weak. I had thrown it away, but it was back. I swallowed hard. I approached it and lifted the receiver. Before I could say anything, the line crackled. The breathing was louder. I pulled the receiver away from my ear. I placed it back slowly. I stepped back. The lights flickered again. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath in front of me. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a hammer from a drawer. I held it tight in my hand, knuckles white. I returned to the living room. The phone was silent now. I took a deep breath and slammed the hammer down on the phone's body. The plastic cracked. I hit it again. The receiver fell off. The dial popped out. I hit it several times until it was in pieces. I left the broken pieces on the table. My breathing was fast and shallow. My arms felt shaky. I waited. The light stayed on, no flicker. The air felt normal. I listened for any sound. Nothing. I cleaned up the pieces and put them in a plastic bag. I took them outside and threw them in my own trash bin. I went back inside. I washed my hands. They smelled like old plastic and dust. I tried to sleep, but I stayed alert, listening. The house felt quiet. I got up a few times to check the living room. Nothing changed. No flickering lights. No cold spots. No weird sounds. I finally dozed off. The next morning, I checked the trash bin. The phone parts were still there, broken and scattered. I prodded them with a stick. They looked normal, just old pieces of plastic and metal. I went to work feeling tired but calmer. That night, I expected another call. Nothing happened. I sat in my living room for hours, watching the lamp. It stayed solid, no flicker. The air felt warm. I ran my hand over my neck. I didn't feel anything. No invisible fingers, no strange presence. Over the next few days, nothing unusual happened. I slept better. I watched TV. The house stayed calm. I thought about calling the antique store again, but I decided not to bother. The phone was gone. It couldn't ring. It couldn't breathe. It couldn't laugh. I still remember the sound of that breathing. It was close and slow, like someone standing right behind me. I remember the laugh too. It was faint, almost playful. When I think about it, my chest tightens. But I force myself to focus on what's in front of me. The coffee table, the TV, the plain furniture. Everything looks normal. No flickering lights, no cold air, no strange signals. My house feels empty again. It's a relief. I never figured out what that phone was or why it caused those things. I don't know what would have happened if I kept answering it. I don't know if it would have gotten worse. I'm just glad it's over. I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want to live in a quiet house with normal things. I don't keep old phones around now. If I see something strange at a store, I walk past it. I don't bring it home. I keep my house simple and clean. I keep the lights on sometimes just to be sure. Nothing else has happened since I destroyed that phone. The nights are quiet again. My lamps don't flicker. The temperature stays steady. I don't feel any strange touches on my neck. I don't hear breathing or laughter. I can relax again. I'm glad I smashed it. That's all there is to it. Now I can sleep without waiting for a ring in the middle of the night. If I wake up, it's because I need a drink of water or I heard a car pass by outside. That's normal. I can deal with normal. I don't need anything else. No strange old phones, no weird noises, no cold air. Just peace. I won't forget that sound, but at least it's gone now. And I'm done talking about it. It's over.